Hello?
I see you.
Okay, hi. I didn't see any. I wasn't sure if I was. You have a very good poker face, Sam.
I was reading.
Hello, everyone. It's Tasha. The Personnel Committee meeting is still going on. I'm thinking that's where the mayor, oh, here she is.
We're going to have to be a few minutes late. Personnel is still closing up its meeting, so I'm not going to call this meeting to order for a couple of minutes. We're still waiting for members of the Personnel Committee to join us. They're just finishing up. Well, here comes the first one, so I think the rest of the committee should be on board pretty quickly. All right. Ron should be here shortly. I'm going to start the meeting now. We aren't being recorded yet. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. This is the May 24th special meeting of the Mansfield Town Council. It is a budget adoption meeting. The only item of action on the agenda is adoption of the budget. Ms. Chain, would you please call the roll?
Yes, Osberger.
Here.
Berthelot.
Here.
Bruder.
Here.
Frattoni. Freudman.
Here.
Kotchenberger.
He must have stepped away for a second. He's here.
Moran.
Here.
Shuren.
Here.
Shaken.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, the first item agenda is staff reports. Mr. Aylesworth, do you or Ms. Bradshaw Hill have reports?
The only thing I guess I would report is hopefully everybody received a copy of the drafted motions for this evening's budget adoption session. We went back and forth among staff and with Attorney Deneen, and so the language is somewhat voluminous, but I think we got it right.
I haven't seen that. Just wait 1 second, please.
It was sent late afternoon.
Yes, I got it. So we have 3 resolutions as usual. Or we have 3 resolutions to adopt the 3 parts of the budget, plus the resolution to adopt the Appropriations Act, which is the authorization to the town to expend the money that we have approved. And then we also approved our payment of our share of Region 19 and the capital budget. And then there are amendments to the budget that follow, all of which have been discussed with us at our last budget meeting on the 18th. And then it just keeps on going. There are resolutions after resolutions after resolutions. All right. So,
Oh, Mayor, I apologize. I'm back. Peter Katzenberger.
Mr. Katzenberger, you are here. Would you like to start the discussion on the budget?
Yes, although I think the way I'll start it is we've discussed this, as you just mentioned, at some length. And I think we should have the discussion first, but then I support this budget. It is a 0% increase at a time when I believe, as far as we know, every other town around us, and most of the towns are actually increasing the mill rate, and nor does it depend on future income from, from our share as both the town of Mansfield and sharing within Tallinn County. It does not depend on that. We think will be $7.5 million to balance. So there are obviously always a couple things here and there one might want, but that's not my point. My point is this is a solid budget. It's one I think we can be, proud of during this time, and most proud of the fact that during this period how well our town has performed with COVID-19, and to present this at a town meeting in a couple weeks.
Is there anybody else who, Mr. Katzenberger, do you want to have further discussion? Are you suggesting further discussion before you make as chair of the finance committee, before you make motions?
Yeah, I suggested this for here. I would recommend that if there are questions or comments, that we do so before the motion. I can make the motion as well if we want to go that way. But I know that David and some others, there's a preference to have a discussion before a motion, and this is one of the most important things we do every year.
Does anybody else wish to comment on the budget as proposed with the proposed amendments? We're not going to talk about the budget as it was originally proposed, but as it will be amended, all of whom, assuming the manager has made an initial proposal and proposals for amendments. So the discussion is the proposed changes and the original proposed budget. If anybody wish to comment? Mr. Freudman.
Yes, Mayor, I'll be very brief, and I'm probably going to oppose these motions because I don't think, we're patting ourselves on the back that there's not a mill rate increase, but we got this big infusion of money from the state or from the via the federal government or however that works. And I don't think these budgets that we pass year after year and the one this year represents any kind of frugality on the part of the council, any kind of oversight. I mean, I can give a bunch of examples. I mean, why are we spending $6,000 per pupil per year more than the average school district in the state? Why is it that we spend money on such things as positioning and marketing now for the third year in a row as proposed? There's nothing to show for it. What, we need more signage or more brochures or more, video links? There's nothing to show for it. One example of, education is, of course, the biggest item. Back on October 13th, 2020, the director of the school department came with 2 contracts to be approved, one for teachers and one for administrators. Just the one for the administrators briefly. 3 years in a row, 3% increases, and these are for the 7 highest ranking administrators, everyone just below the director. The principals, assistant principals, and a couple of directors like special ed. Every one of those people made north of $130,000 just for the salary. There was no pushback, and there never is. I oppose a bunch of things in the capital fund. I don't agree with the purchase of the ladder truck. I don't think we need one. That's a $1.1 million item. I don't agree that we have to keep the Discovery Depot going and start assuming large expenses to keep a 40 or 50-year-old building when, nowadays you have 3 private providers of daycare services. Not that it was a requirement for the town to do so 4 or 5 decades ago. I could go on, but you've heard me make comments on this during budget season. I said I'd be brief and I meant it, but I hope you'll understand. I don't see any pushback, any oversight, any frugality on the part of my colleagues of the majority party. And I think that's regrettable. I will have to vote no. And I mean no disrespect to staff who work very hard on these budgets. I know they do. But, it's like nothing is ever grandfathered. You always say we're going to maintain services, every program. I've talked about the community center. It's not viable. And anyway, you've heard me talk about these things before. I'll stop here, but I will be voting no. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Mr. Conchover, I think the time has come to move the first resolution. Now, the process that I am suggesting is, and Mr. Aylesworth, please double check my numbers here. I think we're going to need some help from Ms. Bradshaw Hill on this. The proposed the number in the first resolution for the general fund budget is the number that was proposed in your original budget. Am I correct?
Correct. I believe that's reflective. Yeah, I believe that's what included in my original budget, inclusive of the town and Mansfield Public Schools portion.
Okay. Yeah. So the amended budgets, the amendments that are further down in this list, amendment number 1, number 2, number 3, number 5, perhaps. I'm not quite sure where number 5 belongs, but certainly 1, 2, and 3 would be amendments to that first resolution.
Oh, Mayor.
Mr. Shakin?
What I believe this is in our emails is a motion, a resolution that has a series of resolved clauses, and that ends in the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7th resolved clause, and then an amendment to that motion that follows, that supplants the motion.
So we're going to handle everything, all 3 or 4 funds or 5 as one lump and amend as one lump.
That is how I read what is in front of us. Is that correct,
Okay.
Mr. Ellsworth?
Charmaine, do you want to speak to that?
Sure. This took a little bit of a time to process for myself. As I understand, you all have the opportunity to approve based off of the first, second, and third resolution. the general fund budget that was presented by the town manager, the capital fund budget, and the capital non-recurring reserve fund budget that was originally presented by the town manager, his budget. And then the respective 1, 2, 3 resolutions speak to the appropriations of said dollars.
Right.
2, 3, and then that the proposed accordance with Connecticut State Bill, that's the R19. Then the proposed capital projects, all of those, I'm sorry, and then move to make the adjustments. So these respective 8 adjustments, recommended adjustments, is what Ryan had presented last week. Should you need to make any changes to that, then these obviously wouldn't stand. We would make the changes and you would make the motions specific to whatever those changes are.
All right, here's the problem.
I'm
You guys
confused.
know this. We've done this before. It's always confusing. But what we normally do is if there's an amendment to a number, like the number in the first resolution, the first resolved, we usually make that amendment before we proceed to the next number. Partly because if you amend capital projects, it has a ripple effect on some of the other numbers. We also, particularly if you're going to amend revenue, there's some ripple effects. So but look, because everybody is new and everybody is going to understand what the final bottom lines are going to be, we're going to need, by the way, we're going to need to approve new bottom lines. And we can't do that unless the amendments are incorporated in the final bottom line. Mr. Shaken.
Mayor, I appreciate that this is complicated, but I think we're overcomplicating things. What Ryan sent us in our email is a proposal to adjust how the council would move if we wished to make the adjustments to the budget that he presented to us last week. The thing that's confusing about this email is that there's no distinction in it between the original motion and the proposed amendment to that motion. If everyone looks at their email, I believe the original motion ends after the first set of resolutions and the amendment begins move to adjust halfway down the email. And so if the council wishes to adopt the budget as Mr. Aylesworth presented last week, having made some adjustments based on council feedback, what we would do is to move to adopt Ryan's original budget and then amend his original budget with the language that begins move to adjust, which includes amended bottom lines in the budget in the first 3 resolutions and an amended Appropriations Act in the remaining 4 resolutions at the bottom of the email. The council is, of course, free to make additional changes, and any councilor can propose an amendment. But if it's Mr. Kotchenberger's intention to move the budget that Mr. Aylesworth presented last week, that's what's in the email. As one fell swoop, not 3 separate motions for each fund, but the budget as a whole.
Okay, now, there's a separate set of resolutions that follow the amendments.
They are part of the amendment is how I read what is in our email.
And so those are the new numbers?
The ones at as Mr. Shaken just mentioned, the first set of resolutions where you have 45,626,700 in your general fund, 3,727,900 in your capital fund, and 3,207,640 in your capital non-recurring fund.
Those are not the numbers that are in my email.
That's the first, I think, right? That's
The first one, the top one on my email says 45,626,626. The second number is 3,727,900. $3,727,000, and the third number is $3,727,000.
The third number is 3,727,000.
I think there is an error on the third one.
Oh, it should. I'm sorry. The third one should be 3,207,640.
So,
Somebody needs to share the screen with the resolution in a manner that corrections can be made on the screen, because we don't know what we're seeing.
perfect, thank you.
Mr. Fertoni has just joined us. Welcome, Al.
Hi.
For your understanding, we are wrestling with the issue of what we actually should vote on today. In your email is a brand new email from Ryan that came out late this afternoon that has the resolutions with numbers in them. And we're trying to figure out what actual numbers we need to approve.
Okay.
And apparently there's a typo in the third resolution down.
Although it has been corrected on the screen.
It has been corrected. I can't see it yet. It's not big enough for me to read, is what I'm trying to say. There we go. All right.
So, I'm not, well, Mayor, may I ask, proceed to ask a question?
Please, yes. Followed by, ask the question followed by Ms. Berthelot.
Okay, the question is, so I'm not sure if we should read the original budget and then move to adopt. Why don't we, I think we need to identify the proposals, or I'm not even sure we need to do that. What we need to do is move the final numbers. I don't know if we need to move to adopt the original, then move to amend, and then, up with those.
I believe the process requires us to adopt the original proposal and then amend it.
That's what I was instructed, which is why it's there.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we've always done, and I think that's what we have to do.
Okay.
Ms. Berthelot? You're muted.
My question was the same as Mr. Kachenberger's. It didn't really seem to make sense. I guess if it's a procedural requirement to adopt a budget that we're not going to ultimately adopt. But
no, we moved the original budget and then amended so that the amendments are transparent to the public. Each amendment has to be made, or a group of amendments have to be made as motions, and it has to be explained and then voted on. And then when we vote on the original proposal, which had the original numbers, the actual vote is on the amended numbers, the correct numbers. All right, Mr. Kachenberg, you wish to proceed? You're muted. I think they said that's the second most commonly used sentence in 2020. Mr. Jenkins.
Mayor, are we confident that the numbers that are in front of us on the screen are the correct adjusted numbers, or do we need to take 5 minutes and make sure that everything is straight? I just really want to make sure that we don't mistakenly read and then adopt something that's incorrect, and it seems like we're not quite prepared.
That was that first number that Orion has just corrected on the screen is the only number that is incorrect. I literally just quickly went through with the spreadsheets to make sure that they were correct.
So
just ask it.
There has to be a final number that we would vote on after we have adopted the amendments. that incorporate the changes that the amendments made.
Correct.
And are those numbers anywhere on the pages in front of us?
They're the last 4 resolutions at the bottom, which are your Appropriations Act.
Okay.
So what about the three resolutions immediately above that?
Those are the results of the recommended amendments. Yes.
Okay, so we're gonna, all right. But do all 7, in your view, does all 7 of these need to be read?
No, Peter, here's what you do. You
Sorry?
read the first,
Yeah, read the original budget numbers, right?
read the original budget, then somebody moves that whole set of amendments. And then when we vote, we will be voting on the next words on the page with the next numbers. They do include the corrections.
Okay, slightly different. I'm ready to proceed, but I do like the idea of taking 5 minutes just in case. But I'll proceed if we're ready.
Does everybody understand what we're doing, and is everybody comfortable? Mr. Shaken?
I just want to make sure let me just ask a clarifying question. What's before us on the screen, if I'm looking at it correctly, shows that Ryan has proposed to amend his budget to add $500,000 to the capital projects budget, not to reduce it. Is that correct? Or should the lower number, 3.2 million, that was added just now, go in the amendment rather than the original motion?
We're not changing any of the capital numbers. This is just speaking to where money is coming from to fund capital projects. So there have been no changes made to the amount, aggregate amount being funded for capital this year. That 3.7279 number hasn't changed from what I originally proposed to now. Charmaine, I don't know if you want to kind of explain what's going on there.
So the numbers that you see, I know I'm trying to make sure I say this correctly. The 3.7 million for capital fund is going to be the same because the recommendation that Ryan made last week shows $170,000 being reduced for Squad 207 and then adding $170,000 to road resurfacing and drainage. So 7 and 8 are they just neutralize each other in the same budget. The money was just moved from one line to the next.
So the change that was made to the email is just to make the CNR numbers match in the original motion and in the amendment. Is that correct?
So the change that was made to what Ryan has on the screen was to correct a typo. It was a typo.
So
the third resolution is merely saying, and Charmaine, correct me if I'm wrong, but the third resolution is merely saying essentially that of the $3,727,900 in capital fund budget, things will be funded with the capital fund budget, 3.207640 of that will be funded from the capital non-recurring fund.
Now, if we have 2 different numbers, final numbers for the capital projects budget, I think we should number these resolutions, but this would be the third resolution after the adjustments, $3,473,000. And then below we go back to the 3,727,000. Can we take 10 minutes off the record? I'm sorry. I really think we need to get this straight. I don't feel comfortable I mean, I think the public can expect more.
I think let's recess for 10 minutes and so that the finance chair and the staff can clarify what's going on. We will reconvene at 6:40.
Can we leave should we leave this on or not?
I don't
Can
think
someone just call Peter?
we don't need to go away, but
I think my questions are probably not, yeah, I can call.
Peter, why don't you and Ryan and Charmaine get on a separate call?
Okay. All right, so I'm going to hang up.
No, don't hang up. Just leave your. Oh, I guess you have to hang up. You'll have to leave and come back.
Or you could do it over the regular telephone.
Yeah, let me just, I'll just leave this on the screen. Never mind. I'll mute and turn off my camera.
Mayor, you want us to leave?
The meeting's gonna run until we come back. You can leave it up, David. It's fine.
Okay.
Al. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm doing fine. It's after May 17th.
You getting your life back?
Yeah, it's wonderful to get home early. Get home when it's daylight and all that sort of a thing. So the days aren't as long now. Thank you for asking.
Have you been following the budget discussion?
Yeah, I've been keeping up as best I can. I watch things when I can, and have conversations and all that sort of thing. So, yeah,
good.
It's good to be back.
Yeah, it's glad to have you back.
How you been?
I'm fine. I mean, it's just spring is here. The pandemic seems to be in decline. I'm fully vaccinated. What more can you ask?
Here. Yeah, I got fully vaccinated March 15th, so I'm actually a couple months into it now.
Mm-hmm.
So it's liberating, to be able to go out and feel safer.
Yep.
What a difference it makes, though.
I'm still feeling a little cautious. It's better to eat outside than in, and
Yeah.
so I don't mind going into a restaurant either.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's everybody's got their comfort level, and you just go from there.
Yeah. Charlie, how are you doing?
I'm doing. I have good days and bad.
Are you fully vaccinated?
Not yet.
I don't know whether I should ask if there's any particular reason, but if you want to talk about it, talk about it. If not, not.
No, I've no need to talk about. I just don't keep my medical history private.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's. I gotta say, it does feel liberating. My son and his wife and daughter came up from New York to look at a horse camp in Ellington for Zadie, and we met for lunch and then went out there. And I haven't hugged them, I don't think, in a year. It just felt really nice.
Yeah, I have 4 brothers, and 4 of the 5 of us are fully vaccinated. We have a rebel in our hands.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, he's he's refusing. So that happens.
It happens. At least if all the rest of you are vaccinated, you can feel somewhat safe around him. But there still are some issues. It's not. None of it's perfect.
Correct. Yeah.
But we have 1 more minute. I'm going to go get something to drink. I'll be right back.
Okay.
I am such a klutz. I went to pour a glass of water out of a pitcher and the top came off. I had water all over me. So Well, nobody seems to be back yet.
Must be really hashing it out.
Almost there. We're checking final numbers. If members of the public are watching, we are waiting. We are in recess. Our staff and finance chair are making sure that they have complete understanding of what we're going to do and that all of the numbers are absolutely correct. And as soon as that is taken care of, we will come out of recess. So what have you guys been doing with this wonderful weather?
Doing whatever we can outside. You know, it's especially when you're cooped up all winter and all spring. You look forward to getting out in the sunshine and doing things.
Yeah. Does that mean working in your garden or does that mean recreation?
A little bit of both. We have gardens around where I live, but it's sort of scaled back too. We're not doing as much as we did before, and it's just really opening up things. You know, de-winterizing. You know, getting the patio furniture out, whatnot, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So
I have
sometimes just sitting outside, just enjoying it.
Yeah, I have an inflatable kayak, and I went out twice in it this past week. It tells you how out of shape you get in a year of sitting around looking at screens.
Ain't that the truth? Well, people popping in.
Still checking.
Hey, Charlie, I understand you got a new computer, huh?
Yeah, I haven't crashed. I haven't crashed at all tonight.
Good job.
I was kind of forced to do it.
He looks much handsomer too.
Well, I don't know if that's changed any. I mean, certainly, yeah, perhaps I had a fuzzy screen. Yeah, you could be right.
You definitely look better. I will tell you, you definitely look better.
I took my laptop to the guy that I bought it from. You know, Rob's up in Holland, and he had, you know, because I've dropped it a couple times, and he said, you know, there was a lot of things going on with the screen, and not really anything that should have affected with regard to the video card, with regard to me constantly getting booted out and having problems. So it was something going on with with the screen, and for him to spend the time to fix it for like another $100 or two, I got a brand new computer. So, what do you do?
Well, the really important thing from our perspective is that your voice is synchronous.
Right, and most important with him too is that he was saying, because I was plugged in directly. I had a Cat5 line going into the old computer, so it was baffling me why I was not getting a fast enough connection. And I'm on wireless. So again, go figure. And he said, well, you got to understand, you bought this from me 5 years ago. And I said, well, I did drop it a couple times. He said, well, I guess there were some of the screws that hold the LCD screen together and the ribbon that goes from the screen into the computer that were not in the best of shape. And so he said, well, I can go and replace the ribbon. We can figure out a way to get, screws back in to secure the screen a little bit better. He said, but then all told, between all of that and all the cleanup and everything we're going to have to do, he says, you're going to be at like $400.
Yeah.
There was no sense of throwing good money at bad. I said, well, can you make it just runnable? Then maybe I'll just give it to my daughter or something. And so he was able to at least make it so it'll function. Good enough for her web surfing and whatever she's doing, but no, she won't be able to play games on it or anything like that. It might, it's not strong enough. And if she gets a couple of years out of it, she gets a couple of years out of it. She didn't have to buy a computer.
Mayor, I think this is going to be like the personnel committee meeting, down to the wire for the next meeting.
I think that we're going to extend the special meeting until the budget resolutions are adopted and delay the opening of the council meeting. I think that's the only way to deal with this. Because it's too important, and I don't want to go through the hassle of adding it to an agenda and all that stuff. We'll just keep working and then take care of the council when we're ready.
right, thank you, everyone.
All right, we will come out of
All right.
recess. It's taken a little longer than expected, but it's important that we get the numbers right. And what we are going to do is we're going to proceed with the special meeting of the town council and the opening of the regular meeting until we have concluded the budget approval process.
All right, so you want, Tony, okay, so you want to do the, you want to go ahead, because the numbers are now, a couple more changes were made, and the numbers, we believe are now, the numbers are now correct. So I can read this.
I think that makes much more sense because just from a thought process, I'd rather not go away from this and come back to it. It's too confusing to begin with. So we'll just proceed, and we'll have to explain to the public what we're doing at 7.
Okay. All right. Ryan and Charmaine, what's on the screen now is the correct version, correct number, just to make clear.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. So I move the following resolutions. Resolved that the general fund budget for the town of Mansfield appended totaling $45,626,700 is hereby adopted as the proposed operating budget for the town of Mansfield for the fiscal year July 1st, 2021 to June 30th, 2022. Resolved that the capital fund budget for the town of Mansfield appended totaling $3,727,900 is hereby adopted as the capital improvements to be undertaken during fiscal year 2021-2022 or later years. Resolved that the capital and non-recurring reserve fund budget for the town of Mansfield appended totaling $3,207,640 is hereby adopted as the proposed capital improvements to be undertaken during fiscal year 2021-2022 or later years. It is further resolved that the following Appropriations Act be recommended for adoption at the annual town meeting for budget consideration. Resolved that the proposed general fund budget for the town of Mansfield for fiscal year July 1st, 2021 to June 30th, 2022, in the amount of $45,626,700, which proposed budget was adopted by the council on May 24th, 2021, be adopted, and that the sums estimated and set forth in said budget be appropriated for the purpose indicated. Resolved, in accordance with the Connecticut General Statute, Section 1051, the proportionate share for the town of Mansfield of the annual budget for regional school district number 19 shall be added to the general fund budget appropriation for the town of Mansfield for fiscal year July 1st, 2021 to June 30th, 2022, and said sums shall be paid by the town to the regional school district as they become available. Resolved that the proposed capital projects budget for fiscal year July 1st, 2021 to June 30th, 2022, in the amount of $3,727,900 be adopted, provided that the portion proposed to be funded by bonds and notes shall, at the appropriate times, be introduced for action by the town council, subject to a vote by referendum as required by Section 407 of the town charter. Resolved that the proposed capital and non-reoccurring reserve fund budget for fiscal year July 1st, 2021 to June 30th, 2022, in the amount of $2,207,640 be adopted.
Is there a second? Mr. Shaken seconds. Does anybody have discussion? We have some proposed amendments, Mr. Shaken.
I'm happy to make them. Peter, do you want to speak to your motion? Do you want to make the amendments? If not, I'm happy to do it.
Yes, I think we've already spoken. There's obviously some, may not be unanimous, but we've spoken to this and the need to read this first before we move in. So why don't you go ahead with the amendments?
Sure. I'd like to make an amendment to Mr. Kotzenberger's motion, and just so everyone is clear, this is the amendment to adopt the budget with the changes that Ryan presented to the town council last week. I move to amend to adjust the manager's proposed FY 21 to 22 budgets, general fund, capital and capital non-recurring funds as follows. Number one, to add $1,800 to health regulations and inspections to reflect the correct allocation from the town of Mansfield to Eastern Highlands Health District. Two, to add $500 to perception programs and the grants to area agencies allocation. Three, to add $1,000 to CIRAC in the all agencies grant allocation. Four, to reduce $100,000 to the transfer out to capital projects fund budget line. Five, to add $800,000 to pilot state property revenue line from the Appropriations Finance Committee's proposed FY22 state budget pilot increases, which reflect 17% of the total proposed increase. Six, to add $100,000 to ambulance user fees revenue line in the capital non-recurring fund budget, which reflects the American Rescue Plan Act funding recovery for lost ambulance revenue. Seven, to reduce $170,000 from the replacement squad 207 line item in the capital fund. And eight, to add $170,000 to the road resurfacing drainage line item in the capital fund, which will adjust the resolutions that Mr. Kotchenberger just read as follows. Resolved that the general fund budget for the town of Mansfield appended totaling $45,530,400 is hereby adopted as the proposed operating budget for the town of Mansfield for the fiscal year July 1st, 2021 to June 30th, 2022. Resolved that the capital and non-recurring budget reserve fund budget for the town, non-recurring reserve fund budget for the town of Mansfield appended totaling $3,207,640 is hereby adopted as the capital improvements to be undertaken during fiscal year 2019, 2020 or later years. Resolved that the capital fund.
Ben?
Yeah,
There should be a reference to fiscal year 21-22, not FY 19-20.
I was wondering about that. So that last resolved clause should read, resolved that the capital and non-recurring reserve fund budget for the town of Mansfield appended totaling $3,207,640 is hereby adopted as the capital improvements to be undertaken during the fiscal year 2021, 2022 or later years. Resolved that the capital fund project budget for the town of Mansfield appended totaling $3,727,900 is hereby adopted as the proposed capital improvements to be undertaken during fiscal year 2021, 22 or later years. It is further resolved that the following Appropriations Act be recommended for adoption at the annual town meeting for budget consideration. Resolved that the proposed general fund budget for the town of Mansfield for the fiscal year July 1st, 2021 to June 30, 2022 in the amount of $45,530,400, which proposed budget was adopted by the council on May 24th, 2021, be adopted, and that the sums estimated and set forth in said budget be appropriated for the purpose indicated. And resolve that in accordance with Connecticut General Statute Section 10-51, the proportionate share for the town of Mansfield of the annual budget for Regional School District Number 19 shall be added to the general fund budget appropriation for the town of Mansfield for fiscal year July 1st, 2021 and June 30, 2022, and said sum shall be paid by the town to the regional school district as they become available. And resolve that the proposed capital projects budget for fiscal year July 1st, 2021 to June 30th, 2022 in the amount of $3,727,900 be adopted, provided that the portion proposed to be funded by bonds or notes shall at the appropriate times be introduced for action by the town council subject to a vote by referendum as required by section 407 of the town charter. And resolve that the proposed capital and non-recurring reserve fund budget for fiscal year July 1st, 2021 to June 30, 2022 in the amount of $3,141,330 be adopted.
Is there a second to Mr. Shakin's resolution? Mr. Bruder. Mr. Shakin, would you like to speak to your amendment?
Sure, I'd be glad to. Just on the amendment, the council, first I want to thank all of the staff and Ryan for a very comprehensive and well put together budget proposal. I think this is a very appropriate reaction to the council's feedback regarding the manager's original proposed budget, which would have caused a very slight increase in the mill rate. This amendment, as was presented to us last Thursday, is for yet another zero mill rate increased budget. I've been on the council now This is my 6th budget, and I think we have only raised the mill rate once or twice in those 6 years, and very slightly. So I know there was some discussion prior to our recess about the council's fiscal prudency, and I think this amendment shows, should it pass, that the council is in fact a very fiscally prudent body. Yet another zero tax increase budget from the town of Mansfield Town Council, which I think reflects some really wonderful management of town services from Town Hall. It reflects, frankly, this year, we shouldn't take all the credit. It reflects a very healthy state budget and a very unprecedented level of support from the federal government, which we will spend the next several months diving into. But these changes, I think, are good changes to the budget that will allow us to continue to offer our services at the highest level, which is something our citizens want and expect from the town and the boards of education, and we'll do so without having any impact on the taxes that the citizens of Mansfield pay to the town. So I expect to have further comment about the budget once we adopt this amendment, but I will leave it there for the amendment.
So is there any further discussion on the amendment itself? The proposed changes? Seeing none, Ms. would you call the roll on the motion to amend and all of the amended resolutions?
Osberger.
No.
Berthelot.
Yes.
Bruder.
Yes.
Bertoni.
No.
Freudman.
Mr. Freudman
Freudman.
indicates no.
Okay, thank you. Kotchenberger.
Yes.
Moran.
Yes.
Shuren.
Yes.
Shaken.
Yes.
Thank you.
The amendment has passed. Now to return to the budget. Before we open the discussion on the budget, I would like to tell people who are listening that it has been necessary to extend the special meeting on adoption of the budget. We will continue the process of adopting the budget and convene our regular town council meeting as soon as we have concluded this process. Sorry for the delay, but this is, as usual, complex and we needed to get it right. Mr. Freudman.
Mayor, I apologize. I want to make sure my vote went as a no vote. I was having trouble finding the cursor to unmute.
Yes, it did. We were very clear that that's how you had voted.
Okay, thank you.
Any further comment on the motion as a whole? Mr. Freudman has already indicated his intention to vote no. Anybody else wish to comment? Mr. Shaken.
Just again on the budget as a whole, I think again that this is a very good budget for the town. I want to acknowledge the work of our state representatives, Greg Haddad and Brian Smith, and State Senator May Flexer, and the reform that is ongoing in Hartford to the pilot system. I think it's a smart change to assume that some of the money, at least that the Hartford seems to be getting ready to send our way, will indeed come as they wrap up the state budget work. And I look forward to the council working through how to use any additional funds that may come in after this budget. This is a conservative estimate of a change to our revenues. I just want to point out, I know we talked about this last Thursday, but looking at a number of our surrounding communities that offer either proximity in geography or proximity in level of municipal and school services and school quality, that our taxes are lower than pretty much all of them. And in the case of Willington and Coventry, where the mill rate is slightly underneath ours, we're talking, 1 or 2 mills at the most with Willington. That we have lower taxes here in Mansfield than every other surrounding community, and lower taxes also in Mansfield than places like Glastonbury, West Hartford, other places where people may seek out as communities with wonderful and excellent school systems to raise their families. It makes us, what I like to say is probably the best and most affordable place you can live in Connecticut, and it's thanks in large part to really wonderful municipal management over the last several decades, both in the town manager's office and on the council. And so I think this is a very good budget. I think I would hope all of my colleagues would support a budget that both funds excellent municipal services with no cuts or any sacrifices made, and does so without increasing taxes. And I hope my colleagues will support it. Thank you.
Mr. Osberger, followed by Mr. Katzenberger.
Yeah, just as a reply to Mr. Shaken's comments, I would remind Mr. Shaken that although it is noble to compare us to other towns, our responsibility lies within the taxpayers of this town. And our budget reflects what we do with this town and how we are responsible to the taxpayers' money. Thank you.
Mr. Katzenberger?
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I agree. In it earlier makes it's. I mean, I agree with the points that Commissioner Shaken made. I would simply note that approval of this budget and the amount we spend in education, this is not because we simply pass on it. These are deliberate decisions we've made and have made repeatedly, and it's that given the importance of education and the services we provide, we provide this. And if we're wrong, we can be, there's an election every 2 years. So this is not simply passing on whatever budget is given to us. This is reflecting, and I think we can say this definitively because we're here, this is reflecting the services that this town wants and is willing to pay for. It's not because we've never considered reducing education. It's that it's simply not what the large majority of this town wants. And if I'm wrong, we'll be removed from office. But we've been with this position and these services, we have consistently, we being the majority party, if that's the term you want to use, but more important, this view of how the town should spend its money and tax all of us is one that has been consistently approved at the ballot box every 2 years.
Is there anybody else who wishes to speak to the motion on the budget? Mr. Frattoni?
Yeah, hi. I just want to ask Peter a question. There was a timeout a recess where you were reconciling this, and when you came out of it, I didn't really get a sense of how you basically, I don't know if the word is bought into it, but what helped you to say, okay, we're ready? Just sort of help me out with that one.
Oh, yeah. Oh, sure. No, that's a good question. It's simply that most of what it was simply double checking the numbers. And Charmaine or Ryan can correct me if I'm incorrect, is that the typo, for example, I think did lead to an inaccurate number later down. But there was no policy decisions or anything. I mean, it was simply making sure, and not, it's frankly a lot easier to do this off camera, making sure that the final numbers we had all, what they were supposed to be. And that's what it was.
Okay.
The problem is that when we vote on this, it becomes the budget that it goes to the town meeting, and we don't want numbers that we have that are typographically incorrect or that have missed a manipulation because of amendments. And some of them, as you would understand, cascade. You make one change and it requires 2 or 3 others. And so all of that it's a complex enough process that if we don't understand what we're doing, then we're not carrying out our responsibility to taxpayers. Any other comments on the budget motions? Are we ready to vote? Ms. Chain, would you please call the roll on this motion, which is to adopt the budget as amended for the town of Mansfield?
Holzberger.
No.
Berthelot.
Yes.
Bruder.
Yes.
Frattoni.
No.
Freudman.
No.
Kotchenberger.
Yes.
Moran.
Yes.
Shuren.
Yes.
Shaken.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, the budget has been adopted and will be prepared for town meeting. There is a public information session to present our final adopted budget on, please help me out. What is the date of Mr. Kotchenberger's presentation of this budget?
June 8th, Tuesday.
June 8th.
June 8th is the second public information meeting, 1 week before town meeting.
Okay, and the town meeting is on June 15th.
Correct.
Mr. Kotchenberger,
Only that we should know where the town meeting is likely to be.
let's for a discussion at council meeting. All right, with that, I think a motion to adjourn. Is there any public comment on the budget? Mr. Aylesworth, do you have anybody signed up for public comment on the budget?
We do not.
All right, then a motion to adjourn is in order. Would somebody so move? Ms. Berthelot moves to adjourn. Mr. Kotchenberger seconds. Let's take 2 minutes and we will reconvene as the town council. My apologies to anybody who has been waiting for the town council, but this was necessary work.
It's the same meeting link, right? We don't have to go anywhere.
We don't have to go anywhere.
Okay.
All right, I'd like to call this meeting to order. Our council members here. Sam Bruder, where are you? Where's Ben?
I'm back.
There you go. Hello, Ben. Okay, Al is stepped away momentarily. Mr. Freudman is here. Mr. Osberger. Berthelot. Okay, I think we're ready to go. All right, this is the May 24th, 2021 regular meeting of the Mansfield Town Council. My apologies for the delay, but as you know, we were working on approval of the budget to go to town meeting, and that took a little extra time. So the first item on our agenda is a call to order and the reading of the roll call. Ms. Chain, would you call the roll?
Yes, Osberger. Berthelot.
Here.
Bruder.
Here.
Fertoni.
Here.
Freudman.
Here.
Kotchenberger.
Yeah.
Moran.
Here.
Sharon.
Here.
Shaken.
Here.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Osberger was here a minute ago. I'm sure he'll be back shortly. The next item on the agenda is a continuation of the public hearing on the Four Corners Sanitary Sewer Project assessments. This requires a motion for us to go into the Water Pollution Control Authority. Do I have such a motion?
So moved.
Moves. Is there a second? Ms. Berthelot seconds. Is there anybody opposed to our going into the Water Pollution Control Authority? Motion is adopted unanimously. Do we need to call the roll, reread the call for this public hearing, since this is, I believe, the third day of the public hearing? Ms. Jane?
Madam Mayor, I don't think so, no.
Okay. Is there anybody here to speak on the public Four Corners Sanitary Sewer Project assessments?
Madam Mayor, I wasn't made aware of any, but if Tasha's there, if she knows different.
Ms. Smith, are you aware of any?
No, there were no calls or emails about the public hearing.
All right. Since we have had no further interest in this, in public participation, I'm going to declare that this hearing is now formally closed. And we can now vote to return to becoming the town council. Is there a motion to end our role as Water Pollution Control Authority and to become town council again? Mr. Bruder moves. Is there a second? Mr. Kotchenberger seconds. Does anybody object to our becoming the town council again? Seeing no objections, we are now the town council. Is there anybody in the public who wishes to address the town council on any other matter, Mr. Aylesworth?
Not to my knowledge, Madam Mayor.
All right, then I will close the opportunity for the public to address the council. Mr. Aylesworth, you have a report to deliver.
I do, and I'll be brief in the interest of time. Today was our first day where Town Hall was officially fully open, as it were, to the public. No appointment needed, walk-ins welcome. An internal memo that was circulated to employees has been provided to the council, so I won't go into great details. Hopefully any questions you may have had about our reopening and kind of how that's being phased in is addressed in the memo, but I can report that it was pretty smooth affair today. We did not see really a noteworthy uptick in walk-ins. There definitely were some folks who took advantage of Town Hall being open, but we did not see the proverbial, knocking the doors down off the building to get inside. So perhaps more people will avail themselves of the facility as word gets out, but today things were relatively quiet. We are hosting a Memorial Day ceremony at the New Mansfield Center Cemetery on Monday the 31st. That's going to be at 9:30. While the obviously the pandemic situation has improved considerably because various musical groups associated with the schools haven't been meeting and performing together as a group. We have made the decision to forego a traditional parade for one more year. However, we are organizing an event at the cemetery. Invitations have been extended to local veterans, and we are putting together a program for that event so that we can make sure to recognize that important and somber occasion. I sent out an email to the council with this information, but just so others know as well, we do have another opportunity to submit a funding request for earmark, for an earmark. This opportunity is being extended through Senator Blumenthal's office. So previously the town submitted two project requests, or two requests for project funding through Congressman Courtney's office. And so we're submitting the one of the two that did not move on, that Congressman Courtney's office did not advance to the next level. That would be the intersection improvements and redesign at Warrenville Road and Stores Road. We're planning to put together a funding request for Senator Blumenthal's office for the Appropriations Committee to consider. So we'll see if the outcome is a bit different. Our second bite at the apple. The third installment of the town's electronic newsletter is in the process of being developed right now, with a anticipated distribution date of June 1st. The school building committee is making plans for a groundbreaking ceremony for the new elementary school. We've been doing outreach, or starting to do outreach to key state dignitaries to help determine availability. That'll shape, our date, which we anticipate will be mid-June. And the state of Connecticut project sign has been posted in front of the Southeast School, and site preparations are beginning. And I think the only other thing I wanted to note is we have transitioned to adding a couple more hours, as well as altering in accordance with sector guidelines and what fitness facilities across the state are doing. Protocols, including no longer the need to wear a mask if you're a vaccinated individual at the community center. That's in place, but the 2 hours that the facility was closed during midday from 1:30 to 3:30, the facility will no longer be closed. It'll be open continuously throughout the day. And I know that's something that a number of our members and patrons had expressed a desire to see happen. And so we're happy to make that happen. And the rest you can read in my written report.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Aylesworth? Mr. Freudman.
Thank you. I noticed that there was a mention in your town manager's report about housing rehabilitation monies that are available, where people can apply for some kind of a help with funding to make repairs, and they won't have to pay it back, I think, until the house is sold or something. And what it does give is a phone number for people to call. I don't know. My opinion has been, and I don't know what can be done about it unless you. Is there a good, besides just posting the phone number in your town manager's report, is there really a concerted effort by the town staff? Those could be social workers, it could be staff in the planning and development department, which actually oversees that program, or even by our communications specialist, Miss Chady, to reach out to those communities. It means going out to them where they live, seeing their situation, seeing who, maybe there's some repairs, and you're dealing with poor people. They're not necessarily tech savvy and reading the packet and seeing the town manager's report. So I'm just wondering, is the town really making a concerted effort to reach out to those communities? And I mean, to reach out to them in the sense of where they live, where they are, going out to those communities and helping people and helping them apply and all that.
Your point is well taken, Mr. Freudman. I'll be happy to talk with staff to see what our outreach methods have been to date, and to see to what extent outreach and communications, whether it be mailings or in-person visits that are happening also by other organizations that we partner with, to what extent we can piggyback on their messaging and help make sure that programs like this that we offer, that people that could take advantage of those services know that they're available. So I don't necessarily have the ability on the fly here to give you a comprehensive report out of everything we have done or everything we are doing. If Linda's on, she could probably speak to that a little bit. But I think your broader point, I'm sure there's opportunity for improvement, and that's a suggestion we're happy to take.
Mr. Ellsworth, would you like Ms. Painter to reply?
Linda, the floor is yours if you have anything you'd like to expound upon, if you're there.
I'm here. Good evening. So we did send a postcard mailer out, I believe it was last fall, to everyone in town to let them know that the program was available. It goes to everyone, I believe, within the 2 zip codes. And so I will double check that with my staff. They may have just sent it to, I take that back. They may have sent that only to property owners of single family homes, because that may have made a little bit more sense with this program. But we did do a mailer, I want to say in the fall. We do have a webpage, and I do take the councilman's point that not everyone is tech savvy. I do believe that the social workers from Human Services are aware of the program, and if they're working with clients, they do refer people to us if they need assistance.
I would bet that the health department and also housing inspection building department might occasionally encounter people who could make use of this. Mr. Freudman?
Well, just to comment on that, what Ms. Painter said, sometimes just referring people to a phone number isn't exactly helping them. I mean, it takes hands-on. I remember hearing very eloquently and passionately from people in the Human Services department about how they send social workers out to help people and help them fill out forms, even take them to appointments. It was really, quite a display of, hands-on helping people that maybe don't know all the ins and outs of government in order to access services. It takes more sometimes than just sending a postcard out once a year and saying, and then maybe reaching out and saying, here's a phone number you can call and good luck. It takes hands-on, and the way I had heard it from Human Services at one point, I was quite impressed. But I have not been impressed, frankly, by the level of really reaching out to people where they are, helping them where they are. I hope I'm wrong about that, but in the future.
I do think that one of the things as we look forward to life after COVID, it's one of those things that it'll lend itself a little bit more to this sort of in-person grassroots effort that you're alluding to.
Okay, anybody else? All right, then we'll move on to reports and comments of council members. I have a couple of things to say tonight. The Mansfield Town Council and other boards and commissions in Mansfield have been ably reported on by Michelle Warren for the past number of years. She is now going to be covering the Wyndham area, and I would like to wish her well in this new endeavor of hers. We will be covered in the future by Lisa Massacott. I think you've probably seen her byline in the Willimantic Chronicle and on other occasions. So we look forward to meeting her and to having her attend our functions when we can. I would also like to acknowledge the fact that the Downtown Partnership in the last month recognized the contributions of June Krish to the town. The partnership has named a little garden in her honor, and there's a plaque on the wall acknowledging her service to the town as a volunteer, a public servant. She was a very important part of our community for many years, and she's a loss that really has meant a great deal to this town. On the bright side of things, I was the judge of the History Day, one of the judges of the State History Day competition, and I would really like to congratulate a number of students, particularly from our middle school, who reached first place in the state contest. In the junior group exhibit, there was a second place team, Simone Thibault, Amanda Zadnik, and Sylvia Halbrooks presented an exhibit on Mark Twain and imperialism. The second place, there was another second place by Amanda Schweitzer and Eileen Liu on Navajo Code Talkers. A junior individual website. First place for Hiruni Witharama on Rising Voices for a Changing Climate, and also Aram Adler-Smith on his website on the Hello Girls, Women of the Switchboard. These was a group of women who were employed by the Army in World War I to improve communications on this new communication device called the telephone. Junior Papers, Sophia Canera won first place for her Letters for Understanding Communication during the Cuban Missile Crisis. Mary Lynch of the Mansfield Middle School also received an award from the Wadsworth Athenaeum for her paper on the power of the camera to communicate, how Lewis Hine exposed child labor. And at E.O. Smith, there was a first place winner in the group senior performance, McCarthy and the Jackal Pack, how media exposed America's most infamous senator. And that group was Matu Healy Pereira, Lauren Levine, Julia Healy Pereira, and Sarah Levine. And I've got to say that this was a particularly difficult History Day here because everything had to be done virtually, and many of these projects were done by students operating outside of classrooms without the direct coaching and assistance of other people. So the projects were really quite remarkable, as they always are, but even more remarkable under these conditions. And I would particularly like to congratulate those students and their advisors for the great work that they've done. So that's my report. Does anybody else have anything they would like to report or comment on? Mr. Bruder.
Thank you, Mayor. If I could just quickly point out, I have not yet had a chance to take advantage of the Connecticut Drinks on Us program. For anyone who's been vaccinated, you can get a limit one drink per person with proof of vaccination at some local restaurants. Even if you're not vaccinated, it still might be fun to go to one of these places like Applebee's or Hops 44 or Kathmandu. And I know that we have tried as much as often just because it's nice variety.
And people who love Mansfield are encouraged to take a picture of themselves at one or more of these establishments and send them to the Downtown Partnership for publication on the Love Mansfield, Connecticut web, I guess Facebook page or website.
Yeah, I think they're doing it through Instagram and Facebook, that if you post it and tag them, then they'll highlight it, or if you just send it to them, they'll post it for you.
Anybody else? Okay, then the next item on our agenda is the consent agenda. There are a number of items on this consent agenda: minutes, setting a date for a public hearing, replacing Mr. Aylesworth as the representative on a grant resolution. Mr. Freudman?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I'd like to request to pull two things out of the consent agenda and put into the regular order. And those would be items 7B on the Neighborhood Assistance Act program and 7C on the Small Cities Community Development Block Grant. Okay, so what I'm proposing is to move item 7B into new business, item 9 7E. And furthermore, I'm requesting that item 7C be moved into old business as item 8C.
Mr. Shaken, this is a request that does not need a motion. We will remove those items from the consent agenda and place them where Mr. Freudman suggests. Mr. Shaken?
I move adoption of the remainder of the consent agenda.
Is there a second? Mr. Bruder seconds. Is there anybody who objects to approving the minutes? All those, anybody wishes to abstain from the consent agenda? All right, I move that the consent agenda consisting of a single item has been adopted unanimously. Now on to old business. Mr. Aylesworth, is Mr. Miller with us tonight? Here he is.
He is, Madam Mayor.
Hello, Rob.
Hi, Ryan. Good evening, Madam Mayor and councilmen and women. I have, I believe, a relatively short report for you tonight. Starting off with the data of which is really good. Counts continue to trend down significantly. Here in Mansfield, 2 weeks ago, we had about 2 weeks ago we had a count. We had 5 cases, and a week ago we had no cases. So we haven't had no cases in a week in the town since last summer. So that puts us at an incidence rate of 1.5 cases per 100,000, which is really good. And then obviously that takes the town out of the state's color-coded alert response system. So hopefully that pattern stays in effect for the long term. Certainly, vaccines have had an important impact in bringing those numbers down. The Mansfield Middle School testing site's going to be is going to cease operations after Wednesday. There are other opportunities during the weekend, on the weekends and evenings, for residents to seek testing if they so need it. And the demand has been down substantially for the past number of weeks. On the vaccination front, the health district to date has done 9,810 shots at 96 clinics. We have, as I said last time, changed our focus. We're now doing more pop-up clinics and walk-in clinics. We've got regular twice a week hours at the community center for walk-up, no appointment necessary, and we continue to look for pop-up opportunities. We just did a pop-up clinic at the Adventure Park and Stores on Saturday, $25 off discount of your day pass if you got vaccinated. And we'll also be doing a pop-up event at United Services on Frontage Road in Southern Mansfield on Thursday. We're in the throes of facilitating access to the Pfizer vaccine for all school-age kids. The second dose clinic for 16, 17, 18-year-olds is next Tuesday, the 1st, at Coventry High School. And then we've got 2 large clinics scheduled for 12 to 15-year-olds tomorrow at Tallinn High School, and then again a week later, June 1st, at Coventry High School. Both of those are available to all kids within the health district, ages 12 to 15 years old. I should say that the E.O. Smith kids' second doses are actually going to Holly Armory, and Holly Armory's been available to 12-plus-year-old kids all along. They've had lots of appointments available, and so we've been continuing to encourage families in the local area to go to the Holly Armory when it's convenient. vaccination coverage, state of Connecticut's at 50 as of the 19th, I believe. State of Connecticut is at 56% coverage, first dose, 46% coverage for fully vaccinated for the entire population. The health district is lower than that at 49 and 42, but that's largely because the university population is calculated in there. 16,000 students or so. If you adjust UConn out, then that puts the health district around 60% first dose and 52% fully vaccinated. It's hard to extrapolate numbers to the town of Mansfield because I can't. It's really hard. It's really hard to discern of the 8,000 or so persons who have at least received one dose within the town of Mansfield, how many of those are actually UConn students or not. There's no way for me to figure that out. So it's hard to get good numbers for the town of Mansfield. But one strong indicator that Mansfield's doing well is the first dose coverage for those 45 to 64, 76%, and for those 65 plus is 100%. So I think Mansfield, my sense is Mansfield is ahead of the curve based on what indicators are out there and what data is available in terms of vaccine coverage. Homebound continues to go continues to go along. We've done 5 Mansfield residents. We've got one individual pending since the program started. We've processed about 50 health district residents. Of those, 28 we've actually vaccinated, and the rest for various reasons either already got vaccinated or we decided they didn't want to get vaccinated. So there are a number of reasons why somebody doesn't actually follow through with us, but we continue to keep that program moving forward as needed. And overall, the health district's response to the pandemic is winding down, at least for the time being, as long as the numbers continue to be good. And the vaccine program continues to move forward as effectively as we can make it. Since we're no longer doing the mass vaccination clinics, and we're just working hard on trying to get vaccine to those hard to reach individuals and those who may be hesitant. So I'll leave it there and be glad to answer any questions you may have.
Mr. Shakin.
I have a couple of questions. Thanks, Rob. This is all really great news. First, just sort of a broad question. Last year around this time, we entered a period of very little COVID activity in Connecticut, and that was slightly different than things that were happening across the country. But it appeared then that, COVID, for one reason or another, whether it was how humans behave or how the virus behaves or both, had, a very, very low impact on society in the summer months. So, this was the first week you've had no cases since last summer. Last week was that first week. How much of that do you attribute to vaccination rates versus just the seasonality of the virus? And the sort of, follow to that is, ought we to expect there to be an uptick in virus activity in the fall and winter, or is the expectation or thought that the vaccination program will sort of prevent that, and we have basically seen the end of a society, dominated by COVID?
Well, first, I think it's appropriate to point out that last summer there were some significant hotspots in the South. Some significant areas of a number of southern states were hit pretty hard over the summer. So while we did experience a lull up here in the Northeast, the Southeast was not saved that condition. But I can tell you that my sense is that there may be some seasonality to this. It's obviously very hard to attribute and weight that particular factor in the information we're getting now. I can tell you, while Mansfield was 0, the last time a full week went through in which we were able to count all the cases, there are still outbreaks occurring in neighboring towns. We have one going on right now in a couple of neighboring towns, 1 or 2, and those are active investigations that we're involved in now, and so there's still virus out there. Is the point I'm trying to make, and absolutely, I think over time, certainly as more individuals get vaccinated, and with each week that goes by, the percentage of coverage among the population ticks up a couple of percentage points. And I think we'll certainly get to a point where I think we'll be in a reasonably good place. I'm not even going to begin to even broach the topic of herd immunity. That's for individuals who are much more knowledgeable than I. But I think we're definitely going to be in a place where we're controlling the disease within the population. The vaccine is very effective, and I think we're seeing the effects of that now with cases dropping. So I think to overall answer your question or questions, yes, vaccine is effective. Yes, as long as we continue to move forward, the vaccine campaign will continue to see positive things with our numbers. It's going to be interesting to see how well and how much coverage we can get going into next fall, and whether or not we see an uptick then or not.
Thanks. And then just a very specific question, or more operational question, with the middle school site winding down, which I agree makes a lot of sense. Can you just sort of tick off what testing options are available on a regular basis for Mansfield residents? I know it's something that some people are still availing themselves of, even though, of course, usage has gone way down.
Yep, absolutely. Both Generations and Wyndham Memorial Hospital and Willimantic are both doing testing during the week, during the day. They can see hours of operations on their respective websites. And then on nights and weekends, CVS in Coventry is still accepting appointments for individuals. Pretty much, I just in fact checked the website today just to make sure, and there are appointments available after work almost every day and on Saturdays. So there's still opportunities out there.
Any other questions? Rob, would you restate the CDC rules for restaurants and public gatherings again for us? People say they're confused, and I didn't think I was, but then I had to make a decision on something, and I got confused. So could you tell us where we are on this?
Well, sure. So in the state of Connecticut, it's Governor Lamont's recent executive order, recent executive order stipulates that individuals who are fully vaccinated need not wear masks indoors. And now there's some important caveats to this, and this is where the confusion lies, I think. Any organization or event organizer or the management of a building or a business has the authority to require universal masking, also pursuant to the governor's executive order. So I think that's an area of confusion. In one moment, and one provision, the governor says you need not wear a mask indoors, but in another provision of the same executive order, he retains the authority of local business owners and entities and event organizers to require universal masking within their properties or within their facilities or during their events. And I'm not sure if that answered your question. Was that what you were referring to, Mayor?
Yeah, so what would you recommend if a person has been fully vaccinated? Mansfield resident, fully vaccinated.
So,
without a mask and eat inside?
well, so people who are fully vaccinated are well protected. And I think the CDC has made it clear that individuals who choose to take their masks off are protected indoors and out. However, if you're going to be at a large event where there's lots of people, particularly indoors, I would consider wearing my mask. While the vaccine is very effective and the risk is very low, there's still some risk, and also I think it's important to a certain degree to model behavior too among those who are attending this event with you. So I realize that this is not a straightforward answer to your question, Madam Mayor, because I don't want to undermine the effectiveness of this vaccine. People who are fully vaccinated are really safe. But at the same time, you still want to be respectful of those around you, particularly when you're in crowds and indoors. And so I'll leave it at that. Hopefully that made some sense.
Okay. So if you're fully vaccinated and you are masked, you are basically fully safe to go into a place where there's 100 people.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And if there's just a few number of people, then absolutely feel free to take the mask off. But it's a large crowds where we're still concerned, where there's potential for spread, an increased risk of spread, and so I think it's appropriate. But if you're in an indoor space when there's not a lot large crowds, then and the owner and operator isn't requiring you to wear a mask, then absolutely feel free to take your mask off.
Good. I think my friends are feeling a real sense of relief and freedom, and I even hugged my kids this weekend. So
good, excellent.
I think everybody is beginning to feel the darkness lift somewhat. I don't think anybody's given up being cautious, and I think people are still going to be nervous around groups where they don't know people who are unmasked.
Sure.
But other than that, I think there's a real sense of, I don't want to say safety, but I want to say lack of fearfulness developing.
There's still there's still some caution among individuals and among the population, and appropriately so. Remember that most of our kids are still not fully vaccinated, and there's still a segment of our adult population too that's not fully vaccinated. So it's appropriate to remain cautious and prudent for the next few months, at least until that vaccine percentage, that coverage percentage goes up in the population.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, then we can move on to something else. Thank you very much once again, Mr. Miller. It's very nice that you have a shorter and shorter reports. It would be really nice when we don't get to see you at all.
I'm not taking that personally.
Good, that's exactly the way I meant. Okay, thank you. Four Corners Sanitary Sewer Project Assessments, Mr. Aylesworth and Mr. Carrington.
I don't have anything to add because we didn't have any more public comment or feedback on this. John?
First, you have to become the pollution control authority.
Yes. Thank you. Is there a motion for us to become the Water Pollution Control Authority? So moved by Mr. Katzenberger, seconded by Ms. Berthelot. Anybody object to becoming the Water Pollution Control Authority?
No.
Okay, we are the Water Pollution Control Authority. Mr. Aylesworth and Mr. Carrington.
John.
So, Madam Mayor, we're now basically on, if you go to page 37, the process for establishing assessment for construction of Four Corners Sewer Project, that's something that Attorney Deneen put together. We're on basically step 4, which is after the public hearing, and not necessarily at the same time that WPCA has to adopt the formal assessments, and those are in the packet. So normally with a public hearing, you wait to the next meeting unless there's no issues raised. So I think the council or the Water Pollution Control Authority would be okay to adopt the formal assessments, and then we would move on as staff with the next steps. Which
is a motion to waive the requirement of, do we need a motion to move to consider the resolution tonight as opposed to waiting to our next meeting?
Yes,
I'm not sure.
Mayor, you should make that motion to suspend your rules of procedure for tonight.
Thank you. Is there a motion to suspend the rules of procedure for tonight so that we can consider this? Mr. Bruder, seconded by Ms. Berthelot. Does anybody object to suspending the rules to consider this tonight? Mr. Shaken, be careful. Raise your hand at the wrong time. Okay, then I declare that the motion has been adopted. We have suspended the rules to consider this tonight. All right, now, I don't see the motions.
Madam Mayor.
Motion on page 33, right? Mayor.
There is a recommendation.
It's basically all.
It's in order. Got it. It's on in.
Mayor, since we're going to act on this, I know we haven't had public comment in a couple weeks, but could I request that Ryan and John just sort of run down an abbreviated version of the AIS so that folks who are listening can understand what it is that we're acting on, just in case they didn't watch the meeting a month ago.
So I'll start and John can fill in. So the sort of abbreviated 30,000 foot level is, this is a project that is being funded through multiple funding streams. It was originally conceived as a $9 million project. Ultimately, once it was built out, the final cost was just under $8.4 million. $3 million was deployed from grant and aid from the state of Connecticut, which left just under $5.4 million to be divvied up in equal parts from funds to be raised from tax dollars spread across the entire, tax-paying population of the town, and the remainder being paid for by those that own property in the sewer assessment district paying, assessments. And those assessments are derived on a formula that is 50% adjusted frontage and then a unit density calculation. So an individual property owner's proposed assessment is a function of those two parts, and that's by as has been discussed now the last couple meetings, that's by the town's code. There was a discussion at one point about perhaps contemplating a different formula for the assessments, but ultimately the calculations that you all have seen were derived based on what has been in the code for many decades, and so it's in keeping with that long tradition. And I'm trying to remember, it's how many properties, John? 60? What's the number?
63 off the top of my head is what we started with originally. They may have been some combined, so I'm not sure if that's the exact number now, but.
So John, I guess I turn over to you to fill in any other key details for summary purposes.
And with that, there's a process to establishing it, which again, Attorney Deneen did, which is on page 37. So he had the public meetings or public hearings, which we've had 3 nights of those. One party did raise that their property, the way we assessed it originally, was not totally correct. There was a different interpretation. We agree with their interpretation where part of their property is commercial, the other part is residential. So we had to recalculate some numbers. So where their assessment went down, others went up. As new properties or new developments come in and more units come into play, everybody's assessments should go down somewhat. The problem is frontage won't change. So if you have a large frontage and only one unit, you know, your unit price may decrease some, but it's not going to decrease your assessment that much. You may lose a year or two of the 18 payments, but you won't lose half or anything like that. But if you're somebody with a lot of units, you'll see, you know, that will help your assessment go down. If we get, like currently there's proposed about over 750 to 800 units that could come online in the next couple of years. So that could change assessments there. And the payment, it's a one payment. So we have to figure out, you know, the best time of year to assess the property. I'm sure everybody will have their favorite month and their worst month. So we'll figure that out as staff as when the best month is. I'm thinking later in the year. So that gives people time to come up with the money if they need to. And we just have to follow the process. And once we file the assessments, if you adopt them tonight with the town clerk, you know, they have a right to appeal, and they have 21 days from when they see the publication in the it'll be in the Chronicle. And I think that basically covers the assessments.
Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Aylesworth or Mr. Carrington? Questions of fact on the assessment process or issue? All right, then I think Mr. Bruder.
I was going to say, if there are none, I can make the motion.
All right, go ahead.
Move to adopt the formal assessment of the properties in the Four Corners Sanitary Sewer Project. Defer assessments for properties with frontages greater than 100 feet from sewer service until a septic failure or sewer extension. Defer portions of assessments for undeveloped parcels in a residential zone beyond a single-family home. Defer the portion of assessment for single-family homes in commercial zones that are in excess of the single-family home, and allow for payment of an assessment in 18 substantially equal installments.
Is there a second to the motion? Ms. Berthelot seconds. Mr. Bruder, would you like to speak to your motion?
Just to say, thank you, Mayor, just to say that, you know, for the reasons that have been highlighted by our town manager and our director of public works, I think that this motion is in order and hopefully can be passed today.
Anybody else wish to speak on the motion? Mr. Shaken.
Thanks, Mayor. I just want to sort of mention this is a project that's been in the works for a very long time, and John and Ryan and their predecessors have done a lot of work on it. It's been talked about since I was a kid, the issues with septic systems at Four Corners, and with remediation of a number of the environmental issues caused by the septic systems in those areas failing, and that being an impediment to development in that otherwise commercially zoned area. I will say that we've heard from a few property owners with some concerns early on about the amount of the assessment and the fact that as this was a project that was underway, now, geez, when did this referendum pass? 2014, many years ago. There was pretty significant discussion that development would follow very quickly after the sewers came online. And I think that's my hope as a counselor. I think that's likely the hope of many folks on the council and Planning and Zoning Commission and other elected town bodies and the staff. I'm very disappointed that the university has decided to become a major impediment to any development at Four Corners. And I think it's a big issue that we need to deal with them. It's an issue I hope that a new university president will make a priority I want to just remind the council, remind the public that the development of the sewer system at Four Corners was until very recently done in full collaboration with the University of Connecticut, with their full support, and the idea or fact that what might come of such an expansion of capacity would be some development of housing in the town was always something that all parties understood, very much including the voters of the town of Mansfield who voted now 6 or 7 years ago to build these sewer lines. And I'll also note that in the intervening time, the Planning and Zoning Commission has written among the most progressive zoning codes in the state that mandates the development of affordable housing with multifamily housing development. Affordable housing development, which is also currently being held up by the university in court. So I'm hearing myself several minutes ago on Charlie's computer. We don't have a lot of choice in the sewer assessments, and so I just hope and wish that this issue with the university can be resolved very quickly so that significant commercial development can happen in the Four Corners area. Commercial development, which when it happens, will substantially relieve the burden of this assessment on property owners whose properties are not being developed. As Ryan and John mentioned, I think the council explored, could we do anything about this? And the answer is basically, no, we really need to move forward with these assessments as they are being proposed. There's not a lot of wiggle room we have to wait for this issue to become resolved. But it's my sincere desire that we as a town reach this resolution and begin to develop this commercial portion of town development that will have as much of a benefit for us as a municipality, as a community, as it will for the university.
Thank you, Mr. Shaken. Anybody else wish to speak to this motion? All right, Ms. Chang, would you please call the roll?
Osberger,
Yes.
Berthelot,
Yes.
Reuter,
Yes.
Frattoni. I believe I saw him leave the meeting, perhaps momentarily. Freudman,
Yes.
Katchenberger,
Yes.
Moran,
Yes.
Sharon,
Yes.
Shaken.
Yes.
Has Frattoni returned? I don't see him, Mayor. Do you?
I do not see him here. All right, he left momentarily earlier, so maybe he'll return, but in any case, he has not voted on this, so it is a unanimous 8-person vote. Thank you, everybody. This has been a long time coming, but I echo Mr. Shaken's wishes that the process of developing this Four Corners will proceed at a more reasonable rate, and with that will come some relief for these property owners on the assessments. I need a motion to come out of the Water Pollution Control Authority. Is there such a motion? Mr. Shuren moves. Is there a second? Mr. Osberger seconds. Does anybody object to becoming the town council again? Motion adopted unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Carrington. Good night. You get out of here early.
Good night.
Hey, John.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you. Good night. Okay, next item on the agenda under old business is the Mr. Freudman, did you want the Assistance Act public hearing under old business or the CBD?
It was the latter, numbers, what was 7C.
We're now up to the Small City CDBG grant resolution naming Ryan Aylesworth. This is merely a substitution of Mr. Aylesworth's name on a grant resolution, which we have. This is a project that we have, a program we have applied for multiple times. It has We had gotten quite a bit of money out of this program and allowed us to do a number of things. Would somebody, Mr. Aylesworth, would you like to comment on this or introduce it?
I believe it's pretty straightforward. It's just an administrative change needed to make those in the land of paperwork happy.
So the motion is on page 21. Would somebody like to make the motion, Mr. Shaken?
I move effective today to adopt the attached resolution authorizing Ryan Aylesworth to execute all documents and agreements associated with the Small Cities Community Development Block Grant for fire protection equipment and to serve as the town's authorized representative.
Is this a grant that has often replaced hoses and things like that, Mr. Aylesworth?
Well, I don't know historically what the town's received under this grant, but this is ostensibly for replacement of the apparatus.
For the apparatus, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Fatani has rejoined us. Is there a second to the motion? Is there a second to the motion?
Is anybody going to second the motion here?
Mr. Kotchenberger seconds. All right. Does anybody wish to speak to the motion? Mr. Shaken.
Yeah, we've already debated this application at some length, and as was mentioned by Ryan, this is just changing the name of the authorized representative to reflect Ryan's service as town manager. So I think it ought to be something that the council approves.
Mr. Freudman, I know you are opposed to the purchase of this apparatus. Are you going to oppose the substitution of Mr. Aylesworth's name for Mr. Carrington's on this application?
Well, the mayor, you read my mind. You're prescient, as usual. Yes, I am voting no on this, but it's because I am against the purchase of this apparatus. I know that's not what strictly the motion is on substituting the name of the former town manager with the current town manager, but this is the only mechanism I have for voicing my displeasure at this purchase. I do not believe we need a $1.1 million ladder truck. It takes 4 people to operate. The chances that any big calamity where you got to go up a ladder and smash the 4th floor window to extricate a trapped person, that's great for the movies, but in these days with sprinkler systems and smoke detectors and two forms of egress in every place, that just doesn't happen very much. And in the rare case that it did, a mile away, Yukon has a ladder truck, and that would be a good example of mutual aid. I could go on, but this is the only tool I have to once again voice my displeasure at using community development block grant money for a very expensive piece of apparatus that I do not believe the town needs, and that is why I'll be voting no.
Thank you. Mr. Bruder.
I just wanted to mention my support for this, not only for exchanging our town manager, or putting our town manager's name on there, but also for the apparatus. It's not just for tall buildings; it also can be used to access the roof and like say a 2-story building where it may be dangerous for firefighters to go through the front door. They can use it to actually come in from the top. When I was in elementary school, my house burnt down. Luckily, nobody was injured, and my stepfather was he's now a retired firefighter. So, if something like this had been in my hometown at the time, I think that we may have had a better situation. We ended up losing everything, but needless to say, I support this motion.
There was a fire in the 2.5-story buildings next to my house many, many years ago, and I remember watching the firefighters climb on the roof to chop a hole in it. And I kept thinking, what's going to keep them from falling through and or falling off, for heaven's sakes, with all that equipment. But if they had been on a ladder, they would have been a lot safer. Mr. Mitchell.
Yeah, good evening, Madam Mayor. If I may, just make a clarification. The truck that's being proposed to be purchased through this grant program is not only a ladder truck, but it's also going to have a pump and water on it. So it's actually a dual purpose piece of apparatus. It's just not a ladder truck. It's what referred to in the fire service industry as a quint. And it has the capabilities of an aerial, but it also has the capabilities of pumping water at a structure fire or any fire at that matter. So just like to make that, clarification. So it is multi-purpose. So we're getting 2 trucks in one, the best way to explain it.
Yeah, well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Freudman for the second time.
Yeah, I'm not going to ever change any minds here, but the fire department for many decades has ladders that can reach the 2nd floor, and much of our fire apparatus, many of our engine tankers have the ability to pump water. That's standard. Otherwise, why call it a fire engine?
Mr. Katzenberger?
Thank you. As I've expressed before, I agree with many of the points that Commissioner Freudman makes, and the idea of shared services is a very important one, and I'm not sure every single town, especially when we have a ladder truck with the mutual aid assistance within Yukon is necessary. However, for the points that Chief Mitchell made about its other uses, which former Chief Raviola made as well as the fact that the frankly minimum cost this is, I will support this motion.
All right. Is there anybody with anything new to contribute to the discussion? I think we're ready to vote. Ms. Chang, would you please call the roll?
Yes. Osberger.
No.
Berthelot.
Yes.
Bruder.
Yes.
Fertoni.
No.
Freudman.
No.
Katzenberger.
Yes.
Moran.
Yes.
Sharon.
Yes.
Shaken.
Yes.
Thank you.
The motion has been adopted. Mr. Ryan, your name can now go on this application. And now we're on to new business. The first item is the resolution proclaiming June as Pride Month. There's a resolution in the packet. It's on page 63. Ms. Berthelot, did I see your hand up?
Mayor, do you want me to read the motion or simply first read the proclamation?
I would like you to read the proclamation as part of the motion.
Okay. Move effective May 24, 2021, to authorize the mayor to issue the attached proclamation recognizing June as LGBTQIA+ Pride Month. And here's the proclamation. Whereas the town of Mansfield is a welcoming, accepting, and affirming place to grow, and whereas Mansfield recognizes the importance of human rights, equity, and justice, and whereas the town of Mansfield's lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, intersex, and asexual community are a vital part of all fields and professions and contribute to a stronger community. And whereas the town of Mansfield is committed to supporting visibility, dignity, and equity for all people in the community, and whereas the town of Mansfield is dedicated to fostering acceptance of all its citizens and preventing discrimination and bullying based on sexual orientation and gender identity. And whereas Mansfield is strengthened by and thrives upon the rich diversity of ethnic, cultural, racial, gender, and sexual identities of its residents, all of which contribute to the vibrant character of our town. And whereas the Centers for Disease Control recognizes that LGBTQ teens are at higher risk to be the victims of violence and have increased rates of death by suicide when experiencing rejection from their families and communities. And whereas it is imperative that young people in the community, regardless of sexual orientation or gender identity, feel valued, safe, empowered, and supported by their peers, educators, and community leaders. And whereas the rainbow flag, also known as the LGBTQ pride flag or gay pride flag, has inspired hope since the 1970s as a symbol of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer pride and progress. And whereas the Progress Pride flag highlights and celebrates the racial and gender diversity of the LGBTQ community, while pulling us ever forward in the march for liberation for all those who are oppressed. And whereas flying the Progress Pride flag at Town Hall throughout the month of June further symbolizes the town's celebration of diversity and support for the LGBT community. And whereas, as Lin-Manuel Miranda said, after the tragic 2016 shooting deaths at the Pulse nightclub in Orlando, Florida, we live through times when hate and fear seem stronger. We rise and fall and light from dying embers, remembrances that hope and love last longer. And love is love, is love, is love, is love, is love, is love. And love cannot be killed or swept aside. Now, therefore, I, Antonio Moran, Mayor of the town of Mansfield, Connecticut, and on behalf of the Mansfield Town Council, hereby proclaim and recognize June 2020 as Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, Transgender, Queer, Intersex, Asexual Plus Pride Month in the town of Mansfield, and urge citizens to actively promote the principles of equality, love, and acceptance throughout the community. In witness whereof I have set my hand and caused the seal of the town of Mansfield to be affixed on this 24th day of May in the year 2021.
Mr. Shern.
A minor correction, it's references 2020 in the paragraph that begins therefore. It should be 2021.
Yes. Is there a second to Ms. Berthelot's motion? Mr. Shaken seconds. I have asked Ms. Berthelot, I have asked that the resolution be read in its entirety. This is the first time we have had such a resolution. We have celebrated Pride Month in the past, but I think it was because this is really a very significant proclamation on the town's behalf. I've wanted it to be read in full into the record. We have representatives from the Human Rights Commission present. Is there anybody who wishes from that commission to make brief remarks on this, Ms. Nocton?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor and Town Council members. My name, as you know, is Amy Nocton, and I am representing the Human Rights Commission, Mansfield Human Rights Commission tonight. I just wanted to thank everybody for supporting this, for supporting Pride Month. We are grateful for the support the town has shown in the past, which included the availability of flags for public display last year, as a flag is an important way to highlight and support, and combat invisibility. We are aware that though much progress has been made regarding rights for the members of the LGBTQIA+ community, we do need to remain vigilant, even in the face of that progress. And additionally, as one of the advisors to the E.O. Smith Gay Straight Alliance, I would like to acknowledge that the flags that people put in their yards last year and that were available at Town Hall were very comforting and encouraging to the students in the GSA at E.O. Smith High School. So we thank you, Madam Mayor and Town Council members, for your support, and we hope that that continues. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'd like to thank the Human Rights Commission for its work on this subject as well as on many others. Other members of the council wish to comment? Mr. Bruder?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to ask a question. I don't know through you. Was this proclamation language developed by, who was it developed by? So I wanted to say thank you.
Mr. Aylesworth, where did the language for this item come from?
Well, I believe the language was transmitted to Tasha. I don't know if it was prepared by committee in this case. I was under the impression it was prepared by the HRC. I may have that wrong.
The commission would like to comment?
Yeah, I'd just like to note that much of this language was prepared by Catherine Bell, the Director of Youth Services. So we're grateful for her support in developing this.
Thank you.
Thank you. That makes sense. And so thank you to her and to everyone else who put their work into this. I'm very glad that it's before us. I know that we had the flags last year. I'm glad to see that they're continuing this. I know that our town manager and other staff have been supportive with the National Human Rights Campaign in terms of making seminars and other workshops available or participating in. And so I will be voting in favor of this.
Ms. Berthelot, would you like to speak to your motion?
Thank you, Mayor. Just to begin with, just remembering all the loss of all of the people who died during the AIDS epidemic, because as a country, we saw it as a gay disease and we didn't treat it seriously. And all the people who've been ridiculed and had therapy to fix them, who didn't have access to government rights or their constitutionally protected rights. And, to recognize the progress that we've made, but how much more needs to be made, and how important this is as a statement of our town's commitment to being inclusive, but also how intentional this choice is. And it's a choice to be allies. It's a choice to honor the lives of the folks in the LGBTQIA+ community and to honor their pride. And I really do hope that everybody supports this.
Mr. Sharon?
Yes, I'll be supporting this resolution as well. And I want to thank the commission and all involved for strengthening the initial draft of the resolution and making it more easily understandable and something that people can be enthusiastically cognizant of and supportive of across our community.
All right, thank you. Does anybody else wish to speak to the resolution? Then I believe we're ready for a vote. Is there anybody who wishes to abstain from this resolution? Is there anybody who wishes to vote in the negative? Then the motion has been adopted unanimously. Thank you, everybody. We'll have a flag raising somewhere in early June. I don't know whether we'll have flags to hand out or not again this year, but if we do, and if anybody has saved theirs from last year, I think mine is still knocking around the kitchen somewhere. Please feel free to put it out as a sign of celebration for this month of Pride.
And there will be flags this year, Madam Mayor. I was just reviewing email correspondence with Katie Bell, and I believe we have example copies, both full size and miniature, have been provided in our mailboxes here at Town Hall. So that event's being organized.
Thank you. All right, the next item is the resolution regarding Juneteenth, Independence Day. And it's on page 69. Let me get there. All right, Mr. Bruder.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to make the motion.
All right, please do. And you will read the proclamation as well?
Yes, ma'am. Move effective May 24th, 2021 to authorize the mayor to issue the attached proclamation recognizing Juneteenth. And the proclamation will read as follows. Whereas the United States of America, in declaring its independence on July 4th, 1776, proclaimed, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by the Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And whereas despite this proclamation, millions of individuals of African descent were held in bondage in these lands, constituting a grave crime against humanity. And whereas the abolitionist leader and former slave Frederick Douglass spoke to white Americans of the 4th of July holiday, quote, I am not included within the pale of glorious anniversary. Your high independence only reveals the immeasurable distance between us. The blessings in which you, this day, rejoice are not enjoyed in common. The rich inheritance of justice, liberty, prosperity, and independence bequeathed by your fathers is shared by you, not by me. The sunlight that brought light and healing to you has brought stripes and death to me. This 4th July is yours, not mine. You may rejoice, I must mourn, end quote. And whereas slavery was practiced in Connecticut until finally precluded by law in 1848, and whereas slavery was practiced in Mansfield into the 19th century, and whereas on January 1st, 1863, President Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation providing for that all persons held as slaves in all parts of the Confederacy, quote, shall be thenceforward and forever free, end quote. And whereas on June 19th, 1865, Major General Gordon Granger arrived in Galveston, Texas, the final Confederate state in rebellion, and declared, quote, the people of Texas are informed that, in accordance with a proclamation from the Executive of the United States, all slaves are free. This involves an absolute equality of personal rights and rights of property between former masters and slaves, and the connection heretofore existing between them becomes that between employer and hired labor, end quote. And whereas in 1866, Texans began marking the Juneteenth holiday with community gatherings and events such as parades, religious services, speeches and readings, cookouts and music, and whereas communities around the country have increasingly adopted the 19th day of June as, quote, Juneteenth Independence Day, quote, to celebrate the end of chattel slavery and the resilience of the African American community. And whereas the Connecticut General Assembly has directed the governor to observe Juneteenth Independence Day since 2003, and whereas in issuing the proclamation recognizing Juneteenth Independence Day in 2020, Governor Ned Lamont stated, quote, simply recognizing a day and educating people about our country's history is not enough. We must do more. We must take action to reach the goal of a more equal and just society, end quote. And whereas the town of Mansfield has recognized its responsibility to respect, protect, and fulfill the human rights of all residents, and to promote equity and racial justice. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Council of the Town of Mansfield, Connecticut, 1, that the 19th of June of each year will be the Juneteenth Independence Day. 2, that on or around June 19th of each year, the town of Mansfield will support events that commemorate and celebrate the end of African slavery in Mansfield, Connecticut, and the United States of America. 3, that the town of Mansfield will direct the town manager to work with town departments, the Human Rights Commission, and other stakeholders, including but not limited to scholars, historians, community leaders, and human rights activists, to develop activities and events to commemorate and celebrate Juneteenth Independence Day. It witness, therefore, wherefore, I have set my hand and caused the seal of the town of Mansfield to be affixed on this 24th day of May in the year 2021.
Is there a second to Mr. Bruder's motion? Mr. Kotchenberger seconds. Mr. Bruder, would you speak to your motion?
Yeah, if I could, Mayor, I appreciate that. I just wanted to say that, having observed or listened to or read some of the minutes from the Human Rights Commission, I know that a lot of work went into this. I'm very appreciative of that work. And I feel like this is, I don't think I could have participated and had any better suggestions. I think that Juneteenth is something that we as a community should be celebrating and should be recognizing. And I'm very happy that, this proclamation is before us to discuss and vote on now.
I was interested to learn that the very earliest settlers of the Windham area who came, I think, before Mansfield were 2 men, a man and his slave. So there was slavery in this region from the very earliest days of our European establishment. So I think it is really incumbent on the town to acknowledge these histories and recognize them. Mr. Shuren.
2 very small historical notes. One, just a minor point. Because Delaware and Kentucky were not in rebellion, the Emancipation Proclamation did not cover them, and slavery did not end there until the 13th Amendment was ratified a few months later after June, but small point. Second, interesting to note that in the Connecticut Constitution in the 1830s, there was language that guaranteed suffrage to all white males. There was a motion, a resolution, a referendum to remove the word white. Unfortunately, that was defeated. However, it was approved in, I believe, the town of Mansfield and other towns in this part of the state.
Well, we've been ahead of the pack in some ways for a long time. Okay, any further discussion of this? All right, are we ready to vote? Is there anybody who wishes to abstain from this resolution, from this motion? Is there anybody who wishes to vote in the negative on this motion? I therefore rule, seeing no negative votes and no abstentions, that the rule has been adopted unanimously. The motion has been adopted unanimously. Thank you very much. Mr. Aylesworth, we will look forward to hearing what kind of activities the town might undertake, aside from the flag raising. We don't have a flag for this one. We have some other kind of activity. Is there anything being planned that you're aware of?
One thing I want to mention, and it's still a work in progress or an evolution, and I'd welcome Glenn or others with knowledge of what's going on to speak to this too, but the council will recall that we're looking to commemorate Juneteenth with the official sort of public launch, if you will, of the Martin Luther King mural project. Kind of have that project officially kick off then, and then, you know, bookend it with a completion date in October for Indigenous Peoples Day. But a lot of logistical details that you know, probably aren't ready for prime time at this point. But Glenn, I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that.
I think that that more or less covers it, Ryan. Yes, we thought this was very well timed for the launch of that project, and in the spirit of expanding on what Councilman Shuren shared. In addition, there's a new project involved with the schools focused on the history of slavery in Mansfield to begin to surface and identify that history as well. So I think the timing of all these things will allow us to highlight what is a far too neglected part of our town's history. So looking forward to that.
Okay, thank you. The next item on the agenda is the annual meeting town venue. Mr. Aylesworth.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I know this is maybe not for all members of the council, but for those of us who've been thinking about this a bit, there's somewhat of an odyssey here in terms of the migration or the evolution of our thinking for a town meeting venue. I want to update the council because, as you'll recall from prior meetings or meeting where the venue, you all voted to schedule the town meeting to take place on June 15th. Beginning at 6 p.m. With the venue being the football field at the E.O. Smith Regional High School. And of course, that was done out of a recognition that doing an open air outdoor town meeting would seem to be sensible from a public health standpoint, given that we're still coming out of a pandemic. This past week, we, several of us, including Mayor Moran, met with representatives from Region 19. Well, we met over by the football field, and you know, basically just talked through our needs and what our goals were, technology requirements, you name it, and without going through all the details that probably aren't super critical to where this conversation is going, I would just summarize by saying it started to feel less and less like it was the right fit. That the area of the field that we would be able to use was a little more limited than we originally thought. You know, suffice it to say, we weren't going to be able to be on the field or the synthetic track. That basically the school would have only been comfortable with us having spectators in the grandstand, and then, you know, an assortment of head tables for local officials outside the fence in front of the grandstand. So. For a variety of reasons and talking through, you know, that is one of the limitations. Other concerns we had involved AV, audiovisual requirements that we had. It just started to, again, seem like being less and less a good fit. We did talk about, you know, foul weather contingency, being able to move the meeting inside to the auditorium at the high school. However, by the time we started talking about doing it indoors in auditorium, especially one that's roughly the same size or has the same seating as the middle school auditorium, the thought was, well, why not just use the middle school auditorium then? And so, you know, given that things are changing rapidly and in a good way as far as positivity rates for COVID-19, it seemed that, especially with the ability to use the cafeteria in the middle school, that there would be ample space to spread people out in a way that, you know, achieved social distancing. You know, we could obviously impose face mask requirements, and then we also checked. It's important to state with the school administration and confirm that the facility is available on that day and time. I believe they have events booked in the auditorium the day before and the day after, so Monday and Wednesday, but not on Tuesday. And so for those reasons, staff have recommended using the auditorium, which is a space that people are familiar with. People know how to get there. Obviously, our public knows how to get there. Technology needs very comfortably met. The town's been using that space for years. And the thought was just that, especially when you fast forward a few more weeks, that in all likelihood, the COVID-19 numbers will only be that much better. More people will be vaccinated. Hopefully, fewer and fewer positive cases. So that's where we were when the agenda item summary was prepared and distributed to you all as part of the agenda packet. I have since, we haven't really discussed this, but I have heard over the weekend that there's some concerns that have emerged about doing this in an indoor environment, and it sounds like there's some discussion to be had around that. So I'll stop there.
Mr. Shakin.
Thanks, Mayor. And yeah, I am one of the people maybe with concerns. I will say I don't have concerns personally, but I have concerns about making sure that we do everything in our power as a council to be accommodating for people who either are yet to be vaccinated for one reason or another, or who, despite their vaccination status and the way the public health guidance has changed recently, are still feeling uncomfortable about putting themselves in a scenario like the one that Rob described earlier in his report, a scenario that could, while maybe unlikely to, could involve several hundred people together, even wearing masks and distanced in an auditorium. And so I appreciate that there may be some things that could be done to allow people to participate in the meeting from other rooms in the middle school, from their vehicles perhaps. But I still think that the easiest solution and the solution most likely to be accommodating for those folks is to use instead a parking lot, say one of the parking lots at the middle school, with as big of a party tent as we can rent and as many chairs as we can fit in it, with some distance in between them, and a small stage and some microphones and a projector screen, and pay for it with our ARPA money, to have our town meeting outside on June 15th. So that folks who are still feeling uncomfortable, regardless of their vaccination status, of being indoors with potentially, dozens or hundreds of other people who they don't know, who aren't part of their family, etc., are able to participate or feel like they can participate. Now, I recognize that in all likelihood, attendance this year is going to be fairly low, but I think we need to do everything that we can as a council to be ready for the possibility that several hundred people show up to vote on the budget. And I think the easiest and best way to do that is to try to do this outside somewhere still.
I would just add that given some of the feedback that came my way over the weekend, staff did reach out to Kelly Lyman, the superintendent, today, and had some back and forth about outdoor options on the same site. And it seems that while there would be a couple options available, the gym, the parking lot, smaller parking area that's just off the gym, would with a tent or a couple large tents, kind of put together depending on what was available, would accommodate at least several hundred people, and then with electricity available nearby, easily accessible, and that would leave the largest parking lot for parking to accommodate our residents and staff and you all. So it does seem like if that's the direction the council wants to go, we can make the site work. I just know that staff, and in particular Tasha, just started making inquiries today about event tent availability and started reaching out to vendors as far as the audio visual component to see who's available.
I will say that I have polled a couple of my most cautious and conservative friends, and they are very comfortable at this point going masked into the Mansfield Auditorium. I was surprised, frankly, because I thought they would share Mr. Shakin's concerns, but I think people are more and more comfortable going out, and they want to go out, and they want to go to a town meeting, frankly. I rarely disagree with Mr. Shakin, but I am going to disagree with him on this one. I think the Mansfield Middle School Auditorium, with accommodations, spacing people out, like putting X's on every other seat and requiring masks and encouraging people to come vaccinated. will work. I think also, the vast majority of people who attend those meetings will be vaccinated. There aren't very many people in their 20s or 30s who come as a rule. And anybody else? Mr. Shuren.
Yeah, just if the meeting were in the auditorium, it would be live streamed, I assume. No solution is perfect, but for what I think probably would be the very few people who still would not feel comfortable being in an indoor space, would it be possible to allow them to drive up and cast their vote after the meeting is concluded, holding the voting open, say, for an hour after the meeting? They would have to drive anyway if they were coming to the meeting, so.
I mean, logistically, I don't think that's an impossibility.
It might also be possible to have a person with a ballot box just walk around the cars. Yeah. Mr. Katzenberger, followed by Mr. Osberger.
I mean, I also feel fine with an indoor meeting, but I do agree. I think with Ben's point, which is maybe it's a small number, but probably is a small number of people who would like to come but don't feel comfortable. But it's easy to accommodate that this year. And I think I agree. People want to come. The people who want to attend the town council meeting would like the opportunity to do so in person. But I think we can do so at really overall minimal costs. And why not do it this year? I don't think it doesn't. I think the system that Ron suggested could work as well. But it's also more cumbersome than simply having an in-person meeting, but one outside.
Mr. Osberger?
Yeah, I've heard a lot of very good ideas. I think a cobbling of perhaps, Mr. Shakins, Mr. Kotchenberger's, Mr. Shuren had a very, very good idea. We could hand out ballots or mail them out to people and then have a large ballot box near the entrance, and people would just loop the circle and put their ballot into the box. Another thing would be to do a combination of what Mr. Shakin suggested, where we have that large tent out on the blacktop and perhaps some people indoors. A combination of those things. But I also might remind people that for close to a year now, people have been flying in airplanes, sitting apart in the airports, but sitting next to one another on the planes. So I think that, our fears should be put aside, especially if people are vaccinated. But those are my comments. Thank you.
Mr. Shakin?
Yeah, I appreciate all of those thoughts. I think there's a world in which we could do a hybrid model. I know Mr. Ellsworth, in his previous job, even though he's ducked away, operated a town meeting by car in New Hampshire last year when there was no indoor gathering whatsoever. And so he has got some experience in this. I'm not opposed necessarily to that idea, but I think just logistically it makes things substantially more complicated than doing something all in one place. And so that's my thought on what Ron suggested or asked about, that while it may be possible, it certainly makes participation in the meeting, speaking, making amendments, listening to your fellow meeting participants, etc. It takes away that part of our town meeting democracy and only allows a vote to be cast. But more importantly for me, frankly, I think it just makes it a logistical nightmare for the clerk and for Mr. Ellsworth and staff, who have to sort of figure out how to get the ballots counted, at least when compared with everyone being under a tent in the parking lot voting the way we would normally vote. That's my first point. My second issue is, while I agree with the mayor that if you were to take a demographic survey of our last 6 town meetings, the results would certainly skew more heavily to people who've had vaccine access for longer than people in my age group and younger. I don't think the council should take steps to make someone who is in my age group or younger, who has not yet had full access to the vaccine for one reason or another, feel like they aren't able to participate. And there are people of all age groups who, for one reason or another, either haven't been able to access the vaccine due to their own health situation, or for whom the vaccine has questionable effectiveness. So I'll give you an example. For people with leukemia, there's a study recently that showed the vaccine may be only 50% effective at controlling or preventing COVID-19. People have issues with antibody production. There's a lot of open questions there. So all of that is to say there's a solution that might accommodate those folks' participation in our democratic process, and there's a solution that to go into the auditorium that would, if I were one of those people who was not a member of the town council, who might otherwise in a normal year attend the town meeting, but had concerns, what I would do would be to say, this is a budget. They did fine last year. I'm going to sit this one out. And I don't think we should be making a decision that might cause people to sit out a town meeting when we have an option available to us that would allow people to participate. So that's my 2 cents on doing it outside.
May I make a suggestion? Why don't we say that the preferred option, if possible, is outside? But if it does not pan out the way we would like it to, that we hold it indoors.
I guess the point of clarification, I guess I'd be looking for just, being mindful of the calendar. So the council, I don't believe will meet again, at least a regular business meeting, until the 14th. So definitely would like to emerge from this meeting with clear direction, I guess, on meeting venue and format.
Well, what I'm suggesting is that it be at the Mansfield Middle School.
Okay.
Either indoors,
okay,
either outdoors if possible, or if not, indoors.
Okay, and so since Kevin's here, we talked about this a little bit when we were talking about meeting at the high school. For noticing purposes and for the purposes of the town council declaring tonight, Kevin, where the meeting's going to be, is the physical address of the middle school specific enough? If we're still trying to figure out the exact precise whereabouts of where the meeting will happen on the middle school campus?
Yes, if we cite it middle school, then we could put signage up when we get there, whether it's in the auditorium or out in the parking lot or otherwise.
Thank you.
Mr. Bruder.
Thank you, Mayor. I like the idea of, putting our preference so that way our town manager understands what we're trying to do. Logistically, I think that, everyone has had some good ideas, and I certainly don't want to exclude anyone from the process, because I know at least a handful of people that can't get vaccinated for one medical reason or another. It's not something that they, if they could, if their doctor had advised it, then they would. And so the idea of having maybe the presentation indoors in the auditorium, but an outside option, and then maybe, having the vote ballot box outside where everyone votes might be logistically a little bit easier. But I understand that this is a tight frame, and our town manager and others and staff need a good direction from us.
Mr. Osberger.
Just on a positive note, we could recall that Mr. Miller just came through and we had 0 cases in town. So, there is that.
Why, Mr. Dean?
I just wanted to remind that I know you've all gone through this many times, but we also are placing a burden on the registrars of voters and others who have to verify the eligibility for folks to vote. As we do more locations, just the getting ballots into correct hands is something we have to think about at the staff level, and it just has the functionary level on that. So just a reminder of some of the other logistical parts that go to this.
Ms. Berthelot, followed by Mr. Shaken.
Yes, following up on what Attorney Deneen said, and in support of what Mayor Moran has suggested, I think the best option, given the concerns of folks who are fragile, is to be outside. And it is the most inclusive way to go. And I think the parking lot idea at the middle school is really excellent and will work really well on many fronts. Nonetheless, there's enormous lift for the staff here in terms of just the logistics of it all. And so I think just to echo, make sure what I'm saying is clear, that I think Mayor Moran's option that we basically have to leave here sort of with best case scenario, we do it outside at the middle school, but we need to recognize that the staff may not be able to pull it off and give them the flexibility to move inside if they have to.
Mr. Shaken.
I agree, and my hope is that this, from a logistical perspective, will actually prove to be somewhat easy to pull off. That a production company that owns a big tent and a PA system and a screen and a stage can be hired, and will find it in their hearts to have a Tuesday night without a wedding or something like that, where they can deploy their equipment. And I think it'd be a great use of some of our ARPA dollars. It's very much COVID related, to cover whatever expense it costs. So I'm happy to make the motion, but I also agree to give flexibility if it's unable to be made to work, that we figure out a way to do it inside. If we do it inside, if we can't do it outside, and that would mean making a motion that's the one in our packet without the word auditorium, essentially. And would allow us to notice the meeting properly. I would just ask, I don't know exactly when the notices need to go out. I'm guessing 2 weeks. But that we know whether it's going to be outdoors or indoors before the public is officially noticed, so that people have a sense of what they're walking into. So I'm going to move pursuant to Executive Order 10E to schedule the 2021 annual town meeting for June 15th, 2021, beginning at 6 p.m. at the Mansfield Middle School.
Ms. Berthelot? Second? Okay. Mr. Shaken, do you wish to speak further to your motion?
No.
All right. Are we ready to vote on this? Mr. Freudman?
Well, I assume it was not inadvertent on Mr. Shaken's part, but I did not. I mean, he was basically reading the motion that was on page 74, but he left the last word out, which was middle school, the Mansfield Middle School auditorium. So we're kind of leaving that open. I think if I understood what he was saying, we're leaving it to the discretion of staff to hold it in the auditorium if they figure that's the most expeditious way of doing it. I just wanted to make sure I understood that correctly.
It's a little bit more specific than that. If the outside option doesn't work, then to hold it inside. It's not just a matter of preference. They've got to really make an effort to make the outside work.
Well, the outside could work, but it could also work at great expense. You want to hire a production company with a tent and that stuff. I mean,
Mr. Shaken's point.
It's very open-ended.
Mr. Shaken's point, by the way, in case anybody missed it, is that the cost of this could be very easily covered by the very large amount of money we're getting from the American Recovery Act, which is designed to cover the costs imposed by COVID, and this will be exactly that. So it is very likely, extremely likely, that the entire cost of this outdoor meeting would be covered by outside funding. The town would not have to carry it. Mr. Shaken.
Thank you. I just to answer Mr. Freudman's question through you, Mayor, that we are required by Executive Order 10E to set, and by our charter, to set the date and time and place for the town meeting. That's what this motion does. We need to do it now because we don't meet again until the day before the town meeting. I think the council has been fairly clear in its direction to staff for how we would like that to proceed. But I would be happy to make a second motion after this one to include that direction in an official way, if that would, if there's disagreement about the town's expenditure of dollars from whatever source on putting together an outdoor production. And so we need to set the date and time with this motion. If Councilor Freudman or others wish to further authorize or direct the staff to do something, feel like they need more official direction than what we've just discussed, I'm happy to make a second motion.
Mr. Aylesworth, I think you have it loud and clear what the council wants you to do.
I think that's accurate. I think it's clear you guys, your strong preference, if at all logistically feasible, is to do the meeting outside. And if there are obstacles to that, the impediments to that emerge that are, exceedingly difficult to overcome with some reluctance, but you are supportive of the indoor venue in the auditorium, basically, if we can't make the outside work at the middle school.
Okay, I don't think a second motion is necessary under the circumstances. Are we ready to vote on Mr. Shakin's motion? Is there anybody who wishes to abstain from Mr. Shakin's motion? Is there anybody who wishes to object to Mr. Shakin's motion? Seeing no objections, I'm going to rule that it was adopted unanimously. All right. Thank you. The next item on our agenda is the new business, the 2021 Neighborhood Assistance Act Program public hearing. This is merely to set a public.
You skipped D.
Oh, resuming in-person meeting. Sorry, I did. Okay. Let's go to the resuming in-person meetings. Yeah, it's on page 75.
Do you want me to speak to this, Madam Mayor?
Yes, please.
Okay. In brief, as you all know, on May 20th, the governor issued Executive Order 12B, and that extended the duration of multiple executive orders, including the authority to continue to meet remotely through the end of June, so through the end of the fiscal year. Obviously, we just got done talking about the safety of meeting in person in the context of a town meeting, but given the relative limited physical size of the council chambers, and although the situation continues to improve in terms of positivity rates and numbers of people that are vaccinated, it seems an argument could be made to take advantage of this additional latitude to continue for the council and its other council committees to meet remotely through the end of June, with an eye towards resuming in-person meetings around the 1st of July. And so that's the recommendation of staff, but we're looking for direction, what the council's desire is. As I understand the council's sort of longer standing tradition of canceling or at times canceling a second meeting in the month of June. I know I indicated a year ago a scheduling conflict that emerged for me in the month of June that would fall on the council's normal meeting night of the 28th. So I believe the council is planning only to have one meeting in the month of June. So in essence, the question is, do you want to hold your June 14th meeting in person or remotely? Because it's essentially only going to affect one meeting.
Mr. Kotchenberger, let's have a question about facts, and then we'll get a motion on the floor. Mr. Kotchenberger, followed by Mr. Ausberger.
Yes. So one point is whether I mean, I think we should, well, I'm sorry. I think we all think we should be in person as soon as we can. But I would recommend for June as soon as, for the next June meeting. However, one of the points in the memo, in Ryan's memo, is that we can't reduce attendance due to public health issues. I don't know if that doesn't sound correct. I mean, we have, you know, fairly broad public health, you know, authority at least. Because that is an issue. If we literally can't do that, then maybe we should delay a few weeks, although it's still going to be an issue in July as well. So I guess that's the fact question.
Well, yeah, when we just lost Kevin, perhaps somebody else who's you know, been in the open meeting law business in Connecticut for longer than I can speak to this. My understanding is that in Connecticut, as in other states, when you have a noticed meeting that's taking place in a physical location, that you can't limit the number of people who are basically permitted to attend or granted admission to that physical location. That has been my understanding, and so we might not anticipate a enormous turnout that's going to fill the council chamber shoulder to shoulder in any given meeting. My understanding is that you know, the council can't, for instance, set a threshold, a number of attendees, and then sort of require everybody else just to participate remotely if it's being live streamed. But perhaps somebody else can speak to that and confirm whether that's accurate or not.
Mr. Bruder?
My understanding is that you are correct, other than if it's for a safety reason, like the fire marshal has designated this room capacity to be 200 or something.
Right, and I guess as I understand it now, you know, with capacity limits being lifted left and right, I don't know that we could necessarily hang our hat on anything to that effect.
Mr. Osberger.
Well, I was going to say if there are no objections, I was going to put the motion on.
Let's get some, are there more questions about the fact of these things? All right, Mr. Osberger, please make the motion.
I move effective May 24th, 2021, to have the town council and council committees continue to utilize remote meetings until June 30th, 2021, and resume in-person meetings beginning on July 1st, 2021.
Is there, Mr. Shaken, you second? Mr. Shaken seconds. All right, Mr. Osberger, you want to speak to your motion?
I do not.
Okay, that's quick and easy. Does anybody else wish to speak to this motion? Mr. Shaken?
Thanks. I had personally actually forgotten about Mr. Ellsworth's travel commitments until he just mentioned them now. I know he's brought them up a few times. He brought them up in his job interview, if I recall. With that, I think it makes sense to give staff time to figure out sort of protocols for council chambers. It's not just us. While Mr. Ellsworth is correct, I don't see us having any big controversial thing to do in 2 weeks. I will just point out for the council that the Planning and Zoning Commission has a number of issues before them currently that are very interesting to many people in town, and I think it does make sense to try to come up with a technological and otherwise solution to do this in the short term, at least, so that people can A, still participate remotely, even if meetings continue in person, and B, figure out some sort of plan to manage the possibility of 150 people showing up and trying to cram themselves into council chambers right now, which I think is something we need to try to avoid. So I think this makes sense. We'll be back in person for our first meeting in July, and because the executive order is expiring, so too will the rest of the town boards and commissions, and we'll go from there.
All right, so Mr. Aylesworth, what do you think the staff is going to be able to do around these issues? Do you know yet? Have any idea?
In terms of looking at what life might be like starting July 1?
Yeah.
I can say that there's been healthy discussion about a variety of related topics. One of the things I know we've talked about at length, and I think this has come up in council meetings, but there's a lot of anxiety around, to the extent that perhaps there might be a looming more permanent legislative fix that would allow for meeting type flexibility. This idea that possibly hybrid meetings will be permitted moving forward. While the intent of that might be great, there are concerns about the logistics of having an in-person meeting and then managing a remote meeting kind of concurrently with that, and having that be the everyday arrangement. So staff will continue to game plan and have those preparations completed in advance of July. I would say that CCM is advocating pretty heavily on making remote meetings, 100% remote meetings, possibility, especially in at least, I don't know what the right terminology would be. I certainly am not going to say it's non-essential, but if you imagine town councils and planning and zoning commissions, if the formality of those proceedings taking place in person makes a great deal of sense, it seems like that there's a certain amount of logic for remote meetings for council appointed committees and subcommittees that would allow people who have other work and life commitments that have very difficult time getting to an in-person meeting, would allow them to continue to participate the way they have over the last 15 months. But those are all things that would need to be addressed legislatively. Right now the expectation is that we're basically come July 1 going to be going back to expectations that were very much the way they were in the pre-COVID world, and meetings would look a lot like they did in the pre-COVID world.
All right. So any further discussion on the motion? Does anybody wish to abstain from this motion? Does anybody wish to object to this motion? Then the motion has been adopted unanimously. Thank you. Now we go back to the Neighborhood Assistant Grant Program public hearing, and that is on page 13.
Since our Director of Planning and Development, Linda Painter, has stuck with it this far, want to make her attendance worthwhile. So Linda, if you want to provide the quick flyover of this.
Sure. This is an annual program that's offered through the Division of Revenue Services, which allows nonprofits as well as municipal organizations to propose projects which businesses can contribute to for tax credits. As part of that, we are required to hold a public hearing, and the town council is required to endorse any application submissions that are sent to the Division of Revenue Services. And I believe that your agenda item summary outlines some of the previous awards that have been granted through this program. So the purpose for tonight is simply to set the public hearing date, which is required before you can take any action. Setting the public hearing does not mean that you will be agreeing to submit applications. It's simply that you are taking public comment on the applications that we have received from nonprofit organizations, as well as any that the town itself is proposing.
Mr. Shakin.
Thank you. I'd like to move to schedule a public hearing for 7:00 p.m. at the Town Council's regular meeting on Monday, June 14th, to solicit public comment regarding potential program applications to the Neighborhood Assistance Program.
Is there, Ms. Berthelot seconds? Speak to your motion, Mr. Shakin?
Yes, we will have ample time to debate the merits of these applications when it is time to pass them along. The first step in this is a public hearing. And as usual with these motions, I think it behooves us to hear from the public before we opine about the whether or not these applications should move forward.
And I believe a public hearing is required by the state as well. So this is a program which has sometimes been funded and sometimes not been funded. So if we are interested in supporting our agencies and our own departments, this is the way to go. So anybody wish to speak to this? Mr. Freudman, I know you're going to object to it. You have a long-standing objection to this project. It comes before us every year, and every year you explain your objections to it. So go ahead.
The Honorable Mayor is not only prescient, but has a keen memory. I can only be a bit jealous of, but in a good way. So yes, no, I won't be commenting on the merits of any of these projects. I think you know my opinion about those, like water harvesting from the community center roof. My objection tonight, and that's why I'll oppose going to a public hearing, is I don't happen to like the fact that the state of Connecticut is allowing businesses that owe taxes to get a tax credit to give to this kind of a project, many of which I think are dubious anyway. The federal government lets you itemize on your taxes if you make charitable donations, and I believe a entity like the town of Mansfield as a 503c can get donations, and those would be deductible. Now, when something is a deduction, let's say somebody makes a $2,000 donation to the town for anything, without, even if they don't tell them how they want it spent. If they're in a 20% tax bracket, the rest of the taxpayers out there across the land may be eating 20% of that $2,000, $400, but yet the donator is still putting his own money, his own skin in the game of $1,600. I really resent the fact that the state says you can give this money as a tax credit, dollar for dollar. You haven't really given up anything. You haven't put anything into this. You may have owed $2,000 in taxes as a businessman or businesswoman, and they say, well, you can give it for these kinds of projects and not pay the $2,000, the full one for one. And I just think that's bad governance. And so without speaking to the merit of these projects, which I question, that might come at a later date, but I'm opposed to having a public hearing because I don't like the governance behind it. The idea that it's a tax credit, that's unfair to every other taxpayer in Connecticut who's basically being tapped so that somebody can get brownie points for making a donation when he has made no donation at all. He would have owed that money anyway to the state. So I don't want to perpetuate by supporting a public hearing that kind of a system. It's unfair to every taxpayer. I'll be voting no. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Freudman. Does anybody else wish to speak to the holding of a public hearing? Mr. Bruder.
Just to say that I'm in favor of having the public hearing so that we can have a further discussion on this, on the, merits and everything else.
Thank you. Are we ready to vote? Does anybody wish to abstain from this? Does anybody wish to vote in the negative? Mr. Freudman, Mr. Ausberger, and Mr. Fertoni are voting in the negative. Is there anybody else wishing to vote in the negative? Those of you who wish to vote affirmatively, please raise your hands. All right, the motion is adopted. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the report of council committees, personnel. Ms. Berthelot?
We met earlier today and we discussed going further with the town manager's 6-month evaluation. We're working on the questions that are going to be asked. It's moving along just fine. And that's as much as I can give you right now. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Freudman?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And I agree with everything Ms. Murthalot said, as the chair of the Personnel Committee, I'm giving in my minority report, which I'm going to give right now. There was another item we discussed. We added it to the agenda, and I'm not saying anything here that is not now a matter of public record. We all got a letter today or yesterday from somebody who resigned from Linda Painter's department, Planning and Zoning, and there were some very powerful allegations there about a hostile work environment, a high turnover. Again, this is all public record. This should be public if it isn't already. Even says that in the past, the town had hired a paid life coach and management mentor for a year to improve her, that's Miss Painter's, supervisory skills due to staff complaint. Now, we learned a couple of years ago.
Mayor, may I make a point of order?
Excuse me, I'm giving a minority report. This is what I said in the report. So we are adding this.
Mayor, may I make a point of order?
Mr. Shaken has a point of order.
I just want to, I appreciate Mr. Freudman's report, and the council did receive a letter today. When the council is going to discuss a personnel matter, we have a procedure. We enter into executive session to make that discussion. If the personnel committee did not do so tonight, perhaps they should have. In particular, when the personnel matter is dealing with a particular employee, that employee has some rights legally to join that executive session or to have those conversations happen in public, to be noticed of that discussion, et cetera. And so while Mr. Freudman is correct, the council was contacted by an employee of the town, I don't think it's an appropriate conversation to have by our rules and by state of Connecticut statute in open session.
May I finish my minority report, please? Or I will appeal this.
Mr. Freudman, I need to respond to Mr. Shaken's point of order before you continue.
Of course.
Mr. Shaken is correct about both state law and council rules of procedure. I think that it is not only that, but I believe that neither of these employees are under the control of the town council. Both directly answer to Mr. Aylesworth, and so rather than have this discussion in public at this time, I think the personnel committee needs to review it in accordance with the rules in executive session, and that would be the appropriate place for it, not here. So I am going to sustain Mr. Shaken's point of order and ask you not to continue in this conversation. And Mr. Aylesworth also, Aylesworth, I have not recognized you, Mr. Freudman. Mr. Aylesworth also had his hand up.
I'm going to make a point of order. I'm going to make a point of order so I can speak.
Go right ahead. Point of order. What is your point of order?
I'm appealing the point of order. If I get a second, I'll speak to that.
All right. Mr. Freudman has appealed this point of order. Is there a second to his appeal?
I will second his point of order.
All right. So my ruling has been appealed. I think we need to go directly to a vote on this. And
I'm going to speak to my motion. I have a right to speak to the motion. It's a motion on the floor.
You have the right to explain your appeal. On what grounds are you appealing, Mr. Freudman?
Because I was going to say we're going to discuss it at the next meeting of the Personnel Committee in executive session, most likely. That's all I wanted to say. I wasn't allowed by the bullying supermajority. I wasn't allowed to finish my sentence. That's my appeal.
Mr. Shaken?
This motion is debatable on the merits of the appeal, and so I will respond to Mr. Freudman's what Mr. Freudman just said about the merits of his appeal, only to say that that is a factually incorrect recounting of the words he spoke prior to my point of order, and I believe the mayor was correct to sustain my point of order. Thank you.
Does anybody else wish to speak to Mr. Freudman's appeal? Ms. Shane, would you please call the roll on Mr. Freudman's?
Do I get a second opportunity to speak to my motion?
Yes.
I'll say again. I was just going to finish that sentence saying exactly what Mr. Shaken was saying. We're going to have an executive session at the next meeting. I hope everybody's satisfied. You did get to interrupt me in the middle of a sentence. Not the first time, surely not the last time.
Thank you. Ms. Shane, would you please call the roll on?
Yes, Osberger.
Madam Mayor, for clarification, what are we voting on?
If you vote yes, you are sustaining Mr. Freudman's appeal. That is, that he should have been allowed to continue to speak in spite of Mr. Shaken's point of order. So if you vote yes, you are supporting Mr. Freudman's appeal of my ruling that his statement was out of order.
Thank you. And I vote yes.
All right.
Berthelot.
No.
Bruder.
No.
Bertoni.
Yes.
Freudman.
Yes.
Katchenberger.
No.
Moran.
No.
Shuren.
No.
Shaken.
No.
Thank you.
Mr. Freudman's appeal is rejected, and so my point of order ruling that he was out of order stands. All right. Finance Committee. Mr. Katchenberger, do you have a report from the Finance Committee?
I do not. We have not met since the last meeting.
Okay. Committee on Committees?
Thank you, Mayor. We have met since our last meeting. We had a wonderful discussion, Councilor Osberger and Councilor Berthelot and I, with Director Pat Schneider in regards to the Human Services Committee charge. We were given some really valuable information, and we will be looking at our next meeting. I don't know if it'll be the next regularly scheduled or if we'll do a special. I really appreciated everyone's commitment to meeting, during this budget season. And so we'll be looking at the actual language with reference to the charge and trying to make membership a little bit more flexible in the sense that it doesn't have to come from certain committees, so that members of those committees aren't having to do double duty and serve on multiple committees. Yeah, and that's it. You want me to do affordable housing?
Pardon?
Do you want me to give a report on?
Yes, too.
So the Affordable Housing Committee, ad hoc committee, is moving forward with the survey that will be disseminated to the community again, where we'll be looking, and I think they even covered it in the Chronicle. We will be looking at how residents feel that we should be funding this housing trust to further our affordable housing goals in Mansfield. And then we'll be looking at getting input on from the community on how to prioritize the spending of that housing trust. And I think that it's been, the committee's been doing really good work. It's been nice to have some bipartisan support for affordable housing in Mansfield.
Thank you. Anything on departmental or advisory committee reports? Anything on petitions, requests, and communications, Mr. Bruder?
I just wanted to point out in the packet that D12 from Paul Aho is actually from Steve Frigno, who's the chair of the Economic Development Commission. And I wanted to speak to his communication just in the idea that multifamily housing projects can help not only diversify our tax base, like he points out, but it can also be used to increase our affordable housing stock if done in a certain way.
Okay. Mr. Osberger.
Yeah, just briefly, in response to Mr. Bruder's statement about bipartisan support, I'll just say that he runs a good meeting, so it helps.
I paid him to say that.
Good for you on both counts. Okay. Is there anything for further future agendas? All right. Then the last item on our agenda is a motion to adjourn. Mr. Shaken makes it. Ms. Berthelot seconds. Does anybody object? Okay. Oh, don't forget Memorial Day. We hope to see you all there at the cemetery on the 31st.
Working on my address already.
Good. Okay, we'll see you then. Good night.
Night, everybody.